All right, so how are we going to start this out? Just with the questions? Or I'll tell you what we'll do. Anybody that throws out a question here on YouTube first, we'll answer that first. So I'm going to give you 3 seconds. If not, we're going straight into the other ones. 3, 2,
Nothing yet.
1. Fuck off. We're going into the other ones. Okay. I haven't looked at these. Here, you said that there was something that you saw.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of different questions. This one was from Ryan Conley. I thought it was just a really well thought out, great question. It was really off from what everyone else had wrote. And it was, what is the biggest lessons you two have learned from one another?
Wow. So what, I got to go first then?
Yeah, because I read the question. That's how the rules work. You're the one who gave me the paper.
I don't think sometimes people understand the history, how far back we go. There's a lie.
All right, well, you think I could. So I have
Okay.
time to think about this one because I saw the question. So when I saw this question, man, it just so many things went through my head. It was, like you said, there's so much there. I think the biggest thing for me, what popped into my head, which I think is always the right, is really perspective. And I always go back to the original location when it was just the little office on Main Street, and I came down for the Tour de Force seminar, and it was there was 10 people, and one of them was Judd Logan was
Yeah.
at that. And at the time, I was playing college football. I just found out about power. I didn't even know it was a sport, right? I just found out it was a sport, anything about elitefts or Westside barbell. And so I came to that Tour de Force seminar, and I'll never forget. It was actually my girlfriend at the time. It was her birthday, but the seminar was more important because that's what you do when you're all in. And I'll never forget, I got under the squat bar, and I was a pretty strong college football player, and you tore my squat apart. And you gave me perspective on what strong was, what good looked like. And I think really that first interaction or that first meeting with us, really over the years, man, the perspective that you've given me on just a lot of things, but really to me that day, I'll never forget. You said, you go, where are you from? I said, Michigan. You go, no wonder you don't know how to fucking squat. And so I think for me, starting with that first time we ever met, it's really been perspective over time has been, I think, the biggest lesson that you've given me. And, we could talk all day on all the different places, but as an overarching theme, to me, it's just been perspective.
Having time to think on this, the best way I know how to answer this, and Josh, I think you need to turn me down just a little bit. I'm a little loud in my own head.
Better?
A little more. A little more. A little more. See, this is really live.
Yeah, you do.
I don't want to say so much that you followed in my footsteps, but we followed the same path. Or you followed the same path that I followed, from coming to Westside, then going from Westside to the same corporate training center, and then going into being an entrepreneur and kind of so forth, and knowing each other through the whole process. It gave me a perspective to be able to look back at the mistakes that I made and try to help you to avoid making those same mistakes, but yet still providing as much guidance and freedom for you to make your own, because they're two different business sectors, and there's no way anybody can ever give you the answers to everything, but you don't want to discourage somebody from making wrong decisions. And over a period of time, as that relationship matured into more being a friendship, without really knowing what was going on, your perspective, being able to provide me with insight and advice, shifted to where you can provide me with insight and advice, not just from knowing me better, because I got a very, very small circle, but from being along the same path too. So you know a lot of the bullshit and adversities and tribulations, even going back before, you know, powerlifting and all the other kind of stuff, to where it's rare when you can find somebody who's willing to call you out on your own bullshit, but then somebody who's actually willing to say, you know what, I completely disagree with what you're doing, but I understand why you're doing it. So I'll support while you're doing it, but I'm not going to agree with what you're actually doing. Because then when you have somebody that's like that I guess you can call them enablers or not enablers. It's all how you kind of want to define that.
I'm not big on titles.
Yeah. What you have, though, is when that time comes, when that answer is going to be no, and there's no conversation about it, there's not very few people in life that you can trust to be able to give you that solid no. And so that's what... And I don't know if it's anything that I've learned from you. It's something that's just kind of manifested from our relationship of being, you know, open and honest with each other for so long that, you know, I'm not really too sure that we know. I can't think of any time that I've fucking lied to you, you know, because there's no reason. You know, I may not tell you certain things, but, you know, there's no reason, because to engage in the conversation only makes each person better. So if for the listeners, if you find somebody like that, you know, it's as you get older, you know, your circle gets smaller. You know, as you're younger, you're trying to make the biggest circle you possibly can because you want to network, want to build your business, you want to build your knowledge, you want to be able to do this. But there's a lot of fucking parasites, there's a lot of leeches, there's a lot of gnats, there's a lot of bullshit, you know. But within all that, there's still good people that you want to be able to keep around, you know, manifest and build upon that relationship, because it does work both ways.
Well, I think it's interesting. I remember being at it was Chuck's 40th birthday party, and Esco was pretty drunk, and so he was hard to understand. But I remember sitting next to him at the fire, and he was talking to me. He said, you know, when you get to be, you know, at the time I was 26, 27, and he said, when you get to be 40 years old, if you have one true friend, you're a lucky man. And at the time, I was in that stage of, I had this big circle, and I'm thinking to myself, how is that possible, right? And he's telling me how Chuck's that one true friend for him. And for me, I think, you know, it's amazing. Some of the things I can think about is, you know, when I give a presentation, or when you give a presentation, where we get together and go, okay, like, let's talk. Like, there's very few people who are going to tell me this sucked and this needs to get better. And I love that, you know, that what you said is just so true. It's just the honesty, both ways, just unadulterated, whether it's going to hurt your feelings or not. But at the end of the day, we both know that we're trying to push each other to get better, whether that's business, whether that's lifting, whether that's relationships. And I think, to me, when you talk about the biggest lessons being learned, I think no matter what it is, it just comes from that 100% unadulterated honesty that I don't think you can have with very many people.
No.
All right, now you get to read a question.
All right, cool. From your experience in coaching, do you feel that mobility work is more challenging for bigger lifters in comparison to slightly smaller lifters? Example. Thank you for providing the example, because context matters. A 5'6" guy in 165 to 181 class versus someone who's 6'2" in the mid 200s and up. I would put another classification in there and go over 6'2", going into, you know, the 300s and so forth. So the question being mobility in regards to size is what it looks like.
Well, I think the question's, I think it's a great question. So I think it allows us the chance to provide some clarity. Mobility has nothing to do with how big you are. It has to do with how mobile you are. So when we talk about this, I know guys that are 350 pounds that can do the splits. It's not about a size thing. It's about a tightness thing. Now, in general, a lot of guys, as they get bigger, too big for their frame, then they're getting that way because they're not working constantly on flexibility and mobility and all these things. And so I think that, when we look at this, there is no difference in size. It's just where are you on the range. So to me, what's the amount of mobility you need for your sport? So in powerlifting, if it's I need to get to parallel, then my mobility better be a little better than parallel, because if my end range of motion is where I got to go in competition, I'm probably going to get hurt. And so I don't think it matters big or little. I think it matters just where you are on that spectrum. So someone who's tighter to start with, they're going to need more work. Someone who's not won't. And I don't think that, I think that obviously for me, and this, the deeper part of that is that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how that works as well. And so we do all this stretching and soft tissue. The nervous system controls all of that, and obviously that's what we teach in RPR. But to me, why am I used to spend an hour before I train doing all that normal mobility, stretching, soft tissue. Now I take 15 minutes, I'm doing RPR and my general warm-up stuff, and I'm in a better place. And I think one is just understanding what you're trying to do, and two is understanding the best way to get there.
To dig a little deeper in that, I'm assuming that this is coming from a power lifter because of the way that this sentence was structured. Would mobility even be a training protocol or a training aspect worth even considering? And B, if it was an aspect worth considering, when would it best be addressed? Because my answer to that would be as part of your warm-up.
Yeah, it's 100%. I think if you can squat full range of motion all the way down, no issues, like what are you doing mobility work for? Like your sport is getting to parallel. You can go past that without any pain or limitations. Like you're mobile enough. And so like, let's be honest, like you don't need barely any mobility to bench press, right? And deadlifting's pretty limited as well. So to me, when we talk about powerlifters, it's do we have the functional range that we need? And beyond that, as far as if we need a little bit of work on that, or if our body hurts, right, then we address it. It's 100% done as part of the warm up. It shouldn't. And if we're utilizing our nervous system properly and following the protocols that you have, it shouldn't be an hour-long thing. It should be 5-10 minutes of stuff as part of your warm up. And if you're doing that consistently every training session, it shouldn't need to be this whole other thing by itself. People make too much of mobility. I think when it comes to strength and power sports, anybody who tells me mobility is the most important thing, I'm going to have my 4-year-old punch them in the face. That little sumbitch mobile as shit, right? He can do anything. Doesn't matter. Put his legs behind his head, do whatever. And then I'm going to punch him in the face. And then when their jaw gets unwired, we're going to have a discussion about what they thought was more important in that power sport, strength or mobility. And so we just need enough. I think today, one, there's a fundamental misunderstanding. Stretching's great, everything's great. But what I've learned with RPR is that understanding how to control my nervous system and do what I need to do with my nervous system, I get where I need to get in 1/100th of the time of doing all the other things. It's like coming in here. If this was dark in here and I'm like, oh, it's dark, I'm going to get lights on. So all of a sudden I start walking around changing all the light bulbs instead of just flipping the light switch. Like nervous system's electricity. Like if you flip that switch, like you can get to a pretty great place pretty quick.
One thing that I found or keep finding interesting throughout the years, and it's a constant. It hasn't changed since as far back as I can remember. Training economy has always been ranked as one of the most important fundamental programming guidelines. Getting the most out of the least is. I don't think there's really anybody that disagrees with that, and if there is, it's a very, very small percentage. But over the years, it's become conditionalized to where now training economy only applies to what you're actually doing with load over 60% in the weight room. So training economy doesn't apply to GPP. It doesn't apply to flexibility. It doesn't apply to mobility. It doesn't apply to proprioception. It doesn't apply to restoration. It doesn't apply to massage therapy. It doesn't apply to anything except loads programmed over 60%, which I find absolutely fucking hysterical if you think about it.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, honestly, my routine, and I fell victim to that. I can say, right? Like, I don't sit here say I'm smarter than anybody. No, like, I've done it. I've made, like, pretty much like everything in my life. I did it. I made the mistake. I had to get better. And so, I would go to the gym on a Saturday. Like, we go to the Spot Athletics. My wife and I would go, or mom watch the kids, like, great Saturday with the two of us. An hour goes by. She's done with her workout, and I'm just getting done warming up. Right? So now she's got to sit around and read a magazine while I get into my workout after an hour of being there. And so for me, like, after I learned there was a better way, right? Now all of a sudden I'm into my workout 15 minutes in, and I'm saving 45 minutes of my life every day, right? And so to me, it's like, how much more productive can I be as a human being when I'm not wasting my time, when I actually am placing a value on training economy through the whole series of the workout, not just the main movement or over 60%.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit of a mind fuck in a way, because before, I always do a lot of stupid shit before the end of the year, and my training over the past couple of years has been weird to say the least. Where in December, one of my goals that I wanted to be able to do was to my goals are always stupid, but to safety bar squat 3 plates with 16 chain aside for a single. And this is kind of going on all year. And I would get there, then something would happen, I get knocked down, something happened, I get knocked down. So long story short, we had to change our training because of an event that we were having going on in December. So on that Friday, I took forever to warm up, did everything you could possibly imagine, from, massage tools to a lot of, RPR stuff, and just probably an hour and a half of warming up. And all my warm-up shit for the upper back, all this other kind of stuff. And I work up, and I end up just barely getting it. So I'm like, wow, fuck, this is cool. I finally did it. I didn't think I was going to be able to do this, but I fucking knocked it out. Then we had an event going on. This is where it gets interesting. We had an event going on that weekend, so we couldn't train. So I was on a group text to some of the other guys that train out here, and girls. And somehow or another, my mouth got myself in trouble, to where I said something along the lines of, fucker, I can do that shit with no warm-up. All right, so then I get called out. Somebody says, well, then do it. So we were planning on training Sunday night. And at first I'm like, oh, fuck. I got myself into one here that I don't know what the hell I'm going to be able to do. And then the way my mind works, it's, what, are you scared? No, you can't be scared. You're scared because you're scared. Then I get myself into this mental loop of hell that it's just not good. So it was, fuck it, I'm doing it. Then I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. Now, how am I going to do this? I have no fucking idea. So I came in, did, a couple wake-up drills. I'm not trying to be a, big pimp artist here for RPR, but I had, oh, shit. He's going to kill me because I forgot his name right now.
How about Tyrell?
Sorry, Tyrell. He was out here, and there's a couple areas I can't reach. I'm like, man, you really need to dig out the back of my neck and all this other shit. And the shit was still loaded because I never tore it down from Friday. So I went over there and I clipped an extra chain on there because, as you know, you never do the same thing twice. Took about 15, 20 minutes to get my mind ready, got super fucking fired up, walked over there and did it for a double. Then when I'm done, I'm madder than hell. Because I'm like, what kind of fucking wimp was I on Friday that I can come in here completely cold with, and I got a video of it, I still haven't posted yet. I get out under the bar saying, fuck warm-ups. Warm-ups are the dumbest fucking thing in the entire world. And everybody here is cracking up and laughing and so forth. But it ties back into what you were saying here as far as like nervous system and things that we don't even know that we don't even know. And I'm not saying what I did was right. It was actually stupid. I wouldn't suggest anybody do it. If anybody out here actually would have gave a fuck about me, they probably would have stopped me. But they actually at that point, they knew I wasn't going to be able to be stopped. It was just, call 911. And some did try to, but it wasn't going to happen. But I always kind of go back to that story when we start thinking about, excessive warm-ups, excessive mobility. I'm not saying warm-ups are worthless. I'm just saying that we don't know.
You actually did say that. You actually
in a way. Yeah, I did. After that.
You actually literally just said that.
From a long-term perspective. Now, I didn't squat. I didn't do anything for a month after this was over because I was completely shot. My body shut down. So let's fall back onto your conversation about the nervous system again. What happens if you're going to if you're going to drive it into the ground? What's going to be the response?
Yep.
It's
Josh,
dead.
Josh, can you turn Dave down a little bit? He's super loud in my earphones. I don't know if it's like that for the people, but it's super loud.
So we kind of got that was a mobility question, which is fucking odd.
Hey, so I got one that falls into what you were talking about, which oddly is weird. But it's so this is, but it talks about unconscious and so the hierarchy of learning, unconscious incompetence, like not knowing what you don't know, then conscious incompetence, right? And then conscious competence, and then unconscious competence, right? And so it's interesting, I think, when you talk about, the things that in the nervous system, like, I think it's funny. So the question is basically where in the competency hierarchy are the things we just talked about. Do we bridge the gap from conscious competence to unconscious incompetence, and which state does RPR have the most impact? And I'm not sure how to think about that, and I'm not going to answer the question. Really, I don't think that he's asking. But the one thing I think that falls to your point in this question, we just don't know what we don't know. So, like, if we were having this table talk 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and someone was to say, what percentage do you think you understand of what's going on in the human body? I would have told you 95%. Like, I get it, right? Like 20 years ago, when I came for the first time and you were teaching me how to squat, when I left that day, I was like, fuck, squatting cures cancer. Basically, it's the greatest thing in the world. And so now I think where I stand in my lens now, I think I understand about 3% of what's going on in the body. And I think it's interesting, I think as we grow and our knowledge grows, we realize like there's so much more that we don't even understand. We don't even know that it's out there. And I think like that's one thing that I think as people are looking at some of this, spending an hour and a half doing this mobility when you didn't need to do any of that, right? Or spending all this time warming up. We do these things because we think it's the best strategy to get us where we want to go. And so we're all doing the best we can with the knowledge we have. Like, but the key thing is like the knowledge we have is a pretty low fucking percentage of what's really going on.
I agree. And I can't speak for others. I'm in a constant process of questioning what I think I know. There's a lot of things that you're pretty solid on, there's, especially when it falls into the powerlifting realm. It's been my whole life. There's a lot of things that I'm pretty fucking sure about, but I will sit and think about them and it's like, I can't say this is true all of the time. There's a lot of times I have to deviate from things that I don't think are true to be able to create the best response for the person that's asking the question or the lifter that's working. So it's anybody who says they got it figured out is just full of shit, for one thing, because it's a constant process that involves different organisms, different people.
Well, I think that to go to that point, anybody who says they all figured out, full of shit. Anybody who tells you that something is the right way for everybody is full of shit. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's different, right? And so, I think there are some general baseline rules, right? But even those rules, for some people, are not going to apply. The thing I fucking hate more than anything is when someone sees someone doing something that's the exception to the rule, and they've achieved mastery over 20, 30 years, and they do it differently, and then someone who's a beginner goes, I'm going to emulate that.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. It's an individual expression of skill at mastery. And that type of thing takes thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours to get to. And so we use these base rules as a starting point, but I cannot stand when people point it's like people say smoking's bad, but my grandpa ate bacon, smoked every day, lived to be 107. He's the one guy, right? Like that. So eat bacon every day, which I do, but then I don't smoke every day. And you know what I mean? See how long you live. Like the odds aren't in your favor. And so that kind of stuff just drives me crazy. Like not everything is for everybody. Or if you think you've got it all figured out, it's like I always used to say, if you say you've never lost a fight, you've never fought enough people.
The other thing I find with the ones that are looking to the outliers for the answers is they're not actually looking at what the outliers did to become outliers. So they didn't look at what they did year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, because nobody really knows that maybe there are some exceptions that they're a genetic freak until actually putting in 3 to 5 years of work.
Right.
But they skip that, and then say, okay, this is what X, does, or this is what he does, or what she does, and that's what I need to do. And it's like, well, how did they get there? Same from a business standpoint. People want to emulate, business or leadership or whatever type of business skills that are associated with X company, but yet never go back to look at what did X company do when it was the one guy working out of a garage with a cardboard table.
Yeah, right. Like people are like, oh, I'm going to do this because Google does this and Amazon does this. It's like, oh, you're going to do something like a multi-billion-dollar company? How about you have zero money, you live with your parents. How about you do it like they did it when they were in a garage?
Yes.
So emulate that. Oh, wait, you can't work 20 hours a day and sacrifice everything else? Well, then you're not doing what they did, right? Like that's such a great point, is that people want to look at where people got to over 20 years and then emulate that. They don't want to, because no one likes to write about like what happened when I was in the garage, right? Like it's cool. Like on Instagram is always the best. I love Instagram. It's super positive, but it's like, okay, I'm posting a picture of my ski trip or my trip to London and doing all this stuff. You know what I wasn't posting? When I fucking moved to Columbus and I'm fucking driving escorts around and fucking living out of my car, right?
Yeah.
Like that shit didn't make Instagram, right? And so that stuff's never going to be part of the story or part of the narrative because people don't like talking about
it.
It
would have got blocked.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't know. But it is kind of a weird state because you don't see those stories, or if you do see those stories, they're hard to find, and nobody pays attention to them because they're going to be boring. But that is the majority. Work is boring.
I remember, it's the whole thing that I remember one time when you were talking about how like anybody who says like find your passion, whatever. Powerlifting, I didn't even know it was a sport. Right? I didn't even know it existed as a sport. Then once I did it and I was pretty good at it, then I thought, wow, this is something I'm passionate about. I never wanted to own a gym. 10 years ago, I would have been like, I never want to own a gym. Then I started running one and I was pretty good at it. Then I got passionate about it. People have passion fucked up. You don't start with passion and then do something. You fucking try shit. If you're good at it and you're successful, success breeds passion.
Yes.
It's not fucking passion breeds success. Like people got that shit fucking twisted.
Yes.
And so it's so funny to me. Like when I look back at my life, I wasn't passionate about any fucking thing I've excelled at, right? Like I didn't even, fuck RPR, I didn't know anything about the nervous system. Like I thought that's shell bullshit stuff. Like all the shit I've been successful with in my life, I had no fucking clue it was even a thing until I started messing with it and was like, oh, this is cool. Oh, I'm seeing success. Guess what? Success breeds passion. Passion doesn't fucking breed success.
Yeah, to validate your statement, if that was true, everybody would be porn stars, right?
Pretty passionate about that.
Everybody's passionate about that. So first time they get laid, right?
Well, to that point, right? To that point, right? So I'll never forget, right? Like it's right? Like we know where this is going.
Here we go again.
Here we go. God, fuck. Was that a question? First time you've been laid. So that's a write-in. So I'll never forget in college, right? And this always was where I go back to with the passion thing. In college, I remember I had this class, and there was a girl in my class, and I'd known her before. She's in my class all semester. I was fucking passionate about this girl. Like, I was like, I want to date her. I had the biggest crush on her, all this stuff. So I go on like 2 or 3 dates. She couldn't kiss. She wasn't that fun to be around. All of a sudden, I'm like, I don't even want to be in the same class with this girl. Like, that's the thing. Passion just leaves to disappointment and failure if you think that's where you're going to go. It does. That's, if you think, like, I'm passionate about this. I see it all the time with young strength coaches. Like, I'm passionate about training. I want to be a strength coach. The first 10-hour day they work, they're like, fuck, I quit. Right? Like, that's not how it works. Like, you don't start with passion for something that you fucking don't even understand and then build a lifetime on that.
Yeah.
You start with little tiny steps and little tastes, and you build success. And once that success crosses a threshold, then you get fucking passionate. Then you buy in. Then you fucking commit.
And then that's when passion is what gets you through 3 days of working without sleep, you know, all the stress, legal battles, all the other kind of bullshit. That's where it really comes in. You know, that's where, you know, that's where, when I would say passion trumps everything, that's where that kind of rings true, because where everybody else would quit because they don't have that extra push, that's where you have to have that passion for it, because it's fucking hard. It's harder than hard. And without that, without passion, or another word for it would be faith, you're done. You know, you quit.
110%. I just think it, again, going back to the, you know, are you emulating where the person is after 20? People see these people, like, okay, it's like you see someone who's doing something at the top that they've been working at for 20 years. And you're like, oh, I want to be passionate like that person. That person had success and built passion. The message that's being sent out today is getting young people fucked up, because they think, I need to be so passionate about something. I just don't know. I'm not passionate about anything. If I wasn't fucking passionate about anything, I exceed. Like, the 4th highest total in the world in my weight class all time for something I didn't even know fucking was a sport. Right?
Yes.
Like, I quit my job. I moved to Columbus in my fucking car with $300 to my name for a sport I didn't know existed. Like, if people want to start at that fucking place, they're going to lead a lifetime full of fucking disappointment.
Passion, in a way, is kind of like love and lust.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
People get passion mixed up, you know. So at the beginning, you know, in a lust phase, you know, you think you're in love, but you're just in lust. You don't know you're in love until you've been through battles, adversity, sickness, health, you know, all the vows that you take. You don't know what that love really is until it's really tested. You know, passion, unfortunately, doesn't have a prefix of lust to be able to define it, or not one that I can think of at this time. But you don't know what it really is until it's tested, you know, and it's put to the fire, and it's had to been used, you know, in such a way.
No, I mean, all the time, you know, I have such an emotional attachment to the spot athletics. And I think for that, because, my wife was pregnant with Avery. I quit my job. I put everything on the line to open the Spot Athletics, and I thought I had the world figured out. And we got down to a point where I was like, if I don't get more business in this month, I have to sell the business. I have no more money to put food on the table for my wife and my kid. And like, I made it through that. So why do I have an emotional attachment? Because I put it all out on the line and got to the point where it's like, I've got $2,000 left before I've got to sell this business to buy food.
Well, let's be real. I mean, how long have you been in business?
7.5 years, almost 8 years.
All right. So how long you went straight? Yeah. So, okay. How many times has that thought crossed your mind? How many times has that been a reality?
Oh, for sure. I mean,
you just named once, and I know that's bullshit.
That's the one that sticks out the most, because everything was leveraged. I had all my home equity was gone. My credit cards were gone. Everything was leveraged.
How many times were you 2 or 3 months away from going out of business?
Oh, a dozen. I mean, a dozen.
But that's the takeaway that I think people need to understand is, it's not what people think it is. Now, granted, I don't want to sit here and put down entrepreneurship and owning a business being the worst thing in the world, because there's a lot of perks that go along with it. It's just sometimes those perks may not be the perks that somebody's actually striving for,
No, look, until you feel that pressure, right? Like you and I have talked about this, right? Like what's my backup plan? My backup plan is I go under, I'm coming to Elite FTS full time to work, right? Right? Like you and I have talked about this, right? Like the odds of both of us going out of business are pretty low, so we've got a backup plan to work for each other.
We're going to be a trainer for you.
Exactly, right? Well, we'll start at janitor, we'll work our way up to trainer. We'll see how you do.
I mean, either way, we both can't fuck up.
Right. Then what's our backup plan at that? We haven't talked about that.
Fuck.
But I think that's the thing, right? And people don't understand is that in entrepreneurship, it's not about losing a business, or like you lose your house, it's starting over. And the thing is, here's the coolest part. So I'll never forget. So this was about 1.5 years ago. I was in one of those situations where I was like, I don't know how this shit's gonna fucking work. And I remember I got on the phone with Murph, and I'm talking to Murph about stuff. And it was the most amazing, like stress relieving, enlightening thing, because Murph I'm in the middle, and I'm like, I'm fucking breaking down, right? I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay this and this. And he just goes, wait. He goes, so if everything explodes and you have fucking nothing, didn't you come to Columbus with nothing? And so if everything explodes, you're back to where you started, but you have an amazing set of experience and skills that you can draw on. And like literally the stress melted away. I was like, I come to Columbus, everything was in a 2-door Grand Am, and I had $300 to my name. Everything implodes, I'm still better off than that, and I've got experiences. And like that one sentence from Murph, that just like literally, I was like, yeah, fuck it. Who cares if it explodes? Like I can build this shit again.
That one experience from Murph, you need to take times 100, because you got kids and a wife. So you have more.
Yeah.
Far more than what you had when you came to Columbus.
Right.
And their unit is worth more.
Yeah.
That can never be taken away.
Right.
Like your building can be taken away, your finances can be taken away, your skill set, hell, that could be taken away, the right action, whatever it's going to be. The things in life that, can't be taken away are the ones that are the highest value, and the ones that should need the highest priority. So I will say that he was right, but
it was what
20% right.
Yeah, it was what
you needed to hear at the time, most definitely.
Yeah.
Any questions through the pipeline?
Yeah, one of them was what made you leave Westside? I don't know if it was it wasn't specified. So
I think we can both answer that.
Yeah, if you guys want to, I figured you both.
Yeah, his story might be a little shorter than mine because I was there longer, but I'll let him go.
Yeah, however you want to do it.
No, so for me, ultimately, 2004,
I want to reiterate that question.
Yeah. So the question is, why did we leave Westside? So this is obviously applicable for Dave and I both. And, for me, I look back at Westside as some of the greatest times of my life, some of the best stories. Ultimately, for me, what happened was it just became growth. So I think that any time that you grow, there's struggle. And for me, that struggle was in 2004, doing 1,100 pound squat, herniated L5S1. Kept training, kept doing stuff. For me, that was an ego. I wasn't supposed to do that lift on that day. Someone came into the gym. They wanted to try to squat with me. I decided it was my personal job to destroy that person because that's what we did. And for me, that was one of the hardest lessons of my life. And ultimately, from that injury for me, I got to the point where, my old roommate, Will, like I went from being, I'm the fourth strongest person in the world. I'm about to be the first non-super heavyweight to total 2,600. I'm on top of the world, and Will's dressing me the next day. And, like you want to talk about changing perspective in life, go from being one of the strongest people in the world to your roommate's putting your underwear on. Like that changes shit real quick. And, as I worked back from that and just traveled around and tried to figure things out, ultimately for me, I loved when I first got to Westside, I'll never forget, you said this to me. You said, Westside isn't about this equipment. It isn't about Louis. It's not about these four walls. It's about all these guys in here working together. And so ultimately, like, I loved those guys that I trained with, right? Like, I love training with Louis. I love training with Chuck and you and Jim and Mike Ruggieri and all those guys. I mean, just such great people. But ultimately for me, that environment wasn't the right place for me to continue to do and be who I needed to be. And so for me, starting my business, doing other things, those things, I just grew as a person. And if you want to be in there, and if you really want to succeed, it needs to be an all-in thing. And it wasn't all in for me anymore. It wasn't what my 100% focus was. And so I removed myself out of that environment because I didn't want to be someone who was taking away from what I knew that place needed to be.
For me, my journey through powerlifting started young, so I had close to a decade of competing before Westside. I think my first meet was in 83. I started training for it in 82. I think I finally came to Westside permanently around 91, 92, but was traveling up on the weekends sometime around 90. Louis was always an influence of mine in warm-up rooms. Growing up, it was Louis and there's John Black and John Florio and Steve Wilson. There were a lot of great lifters that took their time out to help me, which was something that I wasn't used to, from my background and growing up and so forth. So I would have probably come to Westside sooner if I wasn't focused on actually getting a degree. And I had so much time invested in trying to get a fucking bachelor's degree that it was,
they're called doctors. Dave.
Yeah. I should have a PhD for the time I had invested in that. But, to define that, that's because I was also working as a gym owner. I was also working, or not a gym owner, but a gym manager. I was also working as a bouncer. So I was paying my way through school. So it took me longer than what it would take, the other kids that I was going to college with. And powerlifting was always my top priority. So I wasn't out drinking, I was bouncing. I wasn't, a lot of things were the way they were. So my decision to come to Westside was because it had to be my first priority, because it was all the way up until that point in time. For me to go anywhere else, and there were a couple other options that I had, that wasn't going to be the case. It was going to end up being like a second priority, or it couldn't be that. And I was stuck, and getting hurt. So it was, I don't want to go into the periodization style, but my training was stuck. It wasn't changing, all this other stuff. Thought Louis was full of shit. Long story short, moved and found out that he wasn't full of shit. So I spent a long time there. I think 12, 14 years, something like that. And Louis was more than a coach, even though his main role in my life looking back was coach. So a lot of people have their issues with Louis after they leave, and I think that's because they get a little convoluted in what his role really is in their life at the time. His role is to produce numbers out of the gym. I kind of understood that early on when I came in, and still, befriended him and was close to him because I had a strong desire to want to learn why this protocol training program worked. And he had a strong desire to want to teach that and to pass that on, not just to me, but to everybody in the club. Because that was my degree and it's my background, I absorbed the shit out of it. He was introducing me to resources that I didn't know, I didn't even know existed. He was introducing me to coaches I had no idea who they were, so he introduced me to a broad network. So not only did my training go up and did my knowledge of training go up and my knowledge of the sport go up, my network went up. My confidence, went up. He was a mentor. He was a father figure. I mean, I can't downplay his role in any way whatsoever. So I'm kind of laying the groundwork here, because leaving Westside was not an easy decision. You know, a lot of people kind of play it off like I just left, and they don't understand exactly how hard this was. Throughout my time there, you know, my first surgery was before coming to Westside. Then I had a few after I was there. The breaking point was after the second cleanup job of my shoulder, you know, and I put this on me. I don't put this on my physical therapist. I don't put it on Louie. I don't put it on anybody else. You know, my rehab protocols were aggressive, to say the least. You know, it's benching in a full meet 6 weeks after a full surgery and hitting a PR is great to sit here and thump my chest about, but it's not the best thing for longevity of the sport. After it needed to be, I lost range of motion and I couldn't squat, and I couldn't grab the squat bar. So I was stuck to doing, Louie and I came up with this great idea. Let's just use the safety squat bar for 16 weeks, and then we'll switch for 4 weeks, and then we'll, you know, peek into the meet, because at the time we were squatting together for years. That was a great idea, and I was all for it until it came time to switch into the straight bar, and I couldn't fucking grab it. So even with his help and everybody else's help, I could not get my arm under the bar. And then when I went to have it looked at, there was no other choice but a total shoulder replacement. At that time, I'd also had already founded Elite FTS and have had 4 years of loss with no profitability, and still working as a trainer as well. So it wasn't, you know, I had income, but all income I had was going back into the business. My first son was also born, to which, you know, the first 2 years of his life, I didn't sleep in the same room, because I did not want my son waking me up to fuck my sleep up for the meet that I was training for 65 weeks out. So just to give some perspective on where this was from a priority standpoint. When I met with the doctor, the third surgeon, to basically tell me the same thing, I had a wake up call, you know, to where he basically asked me what's next, and I didn't know, you know, because it was my identity. You know, I didn't know anything else. You know, everything I've done, even the personal training, everything has been evolved around. Hell, I was training all my clients who were JL trained the same people after I left the place. I mean, they were not stellar athletes, but they were all training conjugate method, and they were all making progress. And so I had to make a change, and it was the hardest change probably that I've ever had to make in my life. And that was having the conversation with him and telling him that I couldn't do it anymore. And I had to separate myself from the sport because I didn't see any other way around it. And the only way I can define this is to just tell people to search the stages of death. And I went through all of them, you know, from denial to anger. And then I hated the sport, you know, and that's my business. You know, my business was a big part of the sport, and I fucking hated it. I could not go to a meet. I didn't want to be around it. I couldn't talk to lifters. I had a really, really fucking hard time dealing with it, which, you know, led into issues years later. But I couldn't, and I do regret this. I wish if I could go back in time, and I don't have a whole lot of regrets. I wish I would have stayed there and helped some of the other lifters, you know, like JL was still there, Jim was still there. Some of the other people were still there after, you know, I left. I wish I would have stayed a couple more years, you know, to try to help them, you know, from pass on kind of what I learned. But this online thing was providing a bigger platform for me to do the same thing for free, you know. So now instead of helping, you know, just a dozen people in the gym, you know, I was helping thousands of people across the world. Not saying it's right or wrong, you know, I'm indifferent to it because I think, you know, I should have spent a couple more years in there. So it wasn't necessarily on bad terms that I left. It was, it was not on my terms, but looking back in hindsight, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I still haven't had my shoulder replaced, and I can do whatever I want to do. I just can't squat. And anybody that knows me will all agree with, who really knows me, will all agree with 100% certainty. One of the best things that ever happened in my life, as far as being a father, a husband, and a business person, was my ability to not put a straight bar on my back, and my ability to not compete in the sport, because I would have self-destructed, through that. It was just the path it was going down and the direction that I was going. So that's kind of my story, kind of a little longer than what I've told it before. But all respect, goes to Louis Simmons. All respect goes to all the lifters that I trained with. We were there at a very special time. We were there at a time where Louis was just, he's always testing shit, but he was extremely testing some crazy ass shit when we were there. And, I have the scars. Trust me, I have the scars. I have the injuries. I have so many fucking things wrong with me that I can say is due to straining, that we're all for a good cause, because the people that he's helping now are benefiting from that cause. And now he's helping people that go beyond the scope of just powerlifting. So he's helping, sprinters, football players, all these other coaches that are coming in there. So everything that I did wasn't just for me, and that is a great feeling looking back on that, because it is an egotistical sport. I wanted it to be for me. Everything I did, was for me, and I had a bigger ego than anybody else that is out there. But to be able to see how it's come full circle, and to look at the tree that has spawned, and the seeds that have spawned from the group of people that were there when I was there, from JL to Jim to, JM Blankley to George Halber. I can keep going on and on and on and on, of all these people that were there during that time period, that have all gone on to do amazing things in the strength and conditioning industry, with one commonality: to Westside Barbell and Louis Simmons. And Louis Simmons had a amazing knack for being able to take people who had strong wills, strong egos, and strong bodies, and get them to work together. And I've been helping people and helping coaches for a long fucking time, and have never seen anybody be able to do that the way that he did and does.
Well, and I think too, one of the things that is so key, that I think, for me personally, like everybody, I can't speak for anybody else, obviously, but I think obviously you and I have had this conversation, is that I look at everything I've done and I'm doing in my life, and quite honestly, at this point, I can draw a straight line back to Westside Barbell and back to the things and that point changing in my life. And so for me, like, I'm extremely grateful for my time there, and for the people, obviously Louis and you and all the people that I trained with and worked with. But I think one of the things that gets missed by a lot of people after they leave is that I was really, honestly, I fucking hated Louis when I left. I mean, I'm
not going to lie, I did too.
No, I did.
I think we all go through that phase.
Yeah, and that's, when you talk about those stages of grief, right? And I look back, and for a long time, like, oh fuck, I got hurt, and why did they let me get hurt? And like, you said something that's so powerful that I think people don't realize. Louis' job's to get bigger numbers for that gym, and you knew that. I just didn't know. And so for me, I looked at it, and, coming from the collegiate, being in the collegiate strength and conditioning, it's like, oh, in strength and conditioning, my job is to ensure, that my athlete's safety and this and that. It's like, in there, bigger squat, like, who the fuck cares how you get there? And so I think that's one thing too, is that, for me, I went through those stages, and it was pissed off. And now it's like where I'm at in my life. It's like, I fucking love Louis for everything he's ever done for me, and for all the things that Westside Barbell did for me that I didn't appreciate because I was too young to understand those things. And I think that's part of that. I've come around to that, again, to come back to the things we learned, is part of that's having conversations with you and getting some perspective on some things that, you know, again, you're 10 years ahead of me on some of those things. So like, that's what I love, right? Like a smart person learns from their mistakes. A really smart person learns from others. And that's the kind of thing I love when we have these conversations, is that, you know, I'm able to gain perspective and over the years and really shape and understand that, you know, I'm who I am today because of my experiences at Westside Barbell. And I think anyone who ever trained there is better for that experience. And if they don't think so, they just haven't had enough time.
No, and it's, you know, it's interesting because I remember when I was the first person to so-called be recruited, you know, into Westside. I mean, maybe Tom Waddle, but I mean, you're talking a Columbus guy and, you know, driving 30 minutes down the road. But everybody else until that time were basically living in the same west side of Columbus.
Did you get Tom's name off the board, by the way?
Yes, I did, for a week. Yeah, fucker. For 1 week. That's a whole nother story. It pisses me off. But anyhow, he deserved it. So when I came in, you know, I had that mindset coming in, you know, that kind of fit with what was already there. I'd run my head through a fucking wall for anything, you know, and I had good people that helped establish that mindset coming up. So I had the advice of people like George Crawford and Bob Wall, you know, people that have been long forgotten that people wouldn't know but probably should know. And great lifters, elite lifters that were working with me in the gym. And I remember having a conversation with Louie at breakfast one day, and he was talking about, I'd hired Jim. So it was about Jim coming into the club, and you were coming in right about the same time. And what I put out there to him was, are you really sure that you want to do this? And he basically asked me why. And I said, these guys are coming in. They have an understanding of the training process. They already have their elites. So it's not like you're bringing in a lifter that knows the culture of Westside, or a lifter that's been around Columbus that knows the attitude of Westside, or, you know, these are lifters that you're not going to be creating. They're already creating. You're just going to be advancing. But they're not going to have the same potential loyalty that you're going to see out of a Kenny Patterson or a Chuck Vogelpool or somebody, you know, like myself. They helped me when I was 12 years old. You know, you didn't take them from nothing to an elite total. They got their elite total, and it wasn't that big of a deal. You know, it really wasn't that hard for them to do. And now they're coming in. Are you prepared for that? Because the buy-in is going to be different than the buy-in. And his answer to me was, I've already created 80-some elite lifters from my own backyard. I want to create the strongest lifters that have ever walked on the earth. And said, okay, that's fine. You know, I agreed. I totally fucking agreed. You know, it's just funny that Hoff ended up being in his own backyard the whole, you know, right there at the whole fucking time. You know, it's just this funny ass thing, you know, and how it all goes about that. But at that same time, I kind of made a conscious decision in my mind that when these guys came in, you know, and even those that were passed after I left, AJ and, you know, the ones that I knew that had a lot of potential, I wanted to sit down and talk with them for an hour and say, look, this is what you're getting into. You need to know exactly what you're getting into. And then give them a little bit better perspective so they understand you're going to want to rip this fucking guy's head off. You know, he is going to pitch you against other people, and it's going to be on purpose. He's going to act like he hates your fucking guts, and maybe he does. You're going to want to rip your steering wheel off on the way home. You're going to drive home with your lower back in cramps so bad you can't lower your seat low enough to get the cramp to go away and still be able to drive, that you're going to have to pull off on the berm and sit and wait till your lower back cramps, and just on and on and on and on and on. And each one of those guys, after they went through their time period there, were told me that they're all grateful for that, because without that, they never would have lasted.
Yeah, see, my experience was slightly different in that, like, I came in and I was just, I came in training in the night crew, and after my first 2 meets, like,
you had an advantage though.
Well, that's what I was to say. Like, for me, the fall, like, and this is what people don't understand. The fall for me was so fucking hard because I didn't have to go through the struggle, right? Like,
why though, right?
Well, I came in, I was Louis' fucking golden boy, right? Because I had the biggest bench in the gym. I had all those things.
That. You were fucking nuts.
Well.
So you came in and you were fucking nuts and you weren't scared of shit. And that set the groundwork immediately, where everybody else kind of had to prove themselves, especially to Chuck. I mean, he was the one that people had to prove themselves that would take forever. I mean, it's like within a week, it's like, he's fucking nuts, and within 3 months, you tried to fight somebody and they back down, and it's like, well, I guess he's here to go, and so that set the tone. The numbers were secondary, because the numbers are going to come.
But see, it's so funny you say that, because, like, I don't look at, like, I was just being fucking me. Like, I love, like, to me, that environment, like, at that point in my life, like, that was like, I fucking loved it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I hate this or I hate Louis. I was like, oh, Louis pitting me against this person, I want to fucking crush him.
Yes, and you did.
And so that, like, it's interesting. So, like, when I got hurt and I couldn't train at Westside and I wasn't doing what I wanted to do in powerlifting, like, the hard part for me, like, it's different than yours. Mine, it wasn't that longevity. It wasn't that. It was like, I'm fucking up here and then I'm like, for me, that was legitimately 6 years of maybe I'll shower this week, maybe I won't.
Yeah, it was
right?
a hard
like,
fall.
It just, for me, like, the fall was the hardest. I was so high. To me, I was like, I'm going to total 3,000. Like, this is 2004, right? I'm like, I'm going to total 3,000. I'm going to do, like, there was not, like, I was like, oh, brick wall, I'll run through that fucker. Like, it was just, in my mind, I was so invincible. Everything was going so well. Every lift was just, and then all of a sudden I couldn't fucking dress myself. Mm-hmm. Like, the fall for me, like, I mean, I'll never forget, it's funny you say it, we were at a meet, and it was I don't remember if it was APF or what meet it was, and I'll never forget, like, John Stafford's like, and I don't know, I hadn't been in the gym that long, like 6 months, a year or something, which is not that long. And, and Stafford said something to me about, like, oh, fight Chuck. I was like, fuck yeah, I'll fight Chuck. And he was like, no, you wouldn't fight Chuck. I was like, fucking right, I would. Like, I'll fight fucking it. He was like, and then I forget who the UFC, he was like, would you fight him? I was like, fucking right, I would. Like, there's nobody in the world I wouldn't fight. Like, at that point in my life, like, that's mentally where I was. Like, put anything in front of me, anybody in front of me, and I'll destroy them. And ultimately, who got destroyed was fucking me.
Well, that's the pros and cons of that mindset. That's, when I was there, that's the mindset that we looked for, that we wanted. Because, my job was to make you better than me. So if that comes in, Chester was kind of one of the first ones that kind of came in. It's like, oh shit, this is going to be a little rough. But then after like a month, it's like, this motherfucker's strong. Then within a year, it was like, fuck, I just got killed. Then you come in and it was like, fuck, he's already stronger than me. This is easy. Now how do we get him to be able to get other people stronger than him? But so the mindset, was kind of what set that apart, where things got a little challenging, and probably even more so challenging from a mental standpoint, is everybody there was living in pain, and pain is a hard thing to diagnose. You know what I'm saying? It's, you go to the hospital, right? And they're like, I tell everybody that goes in for surgery, just practice saying 10. So when you come out, it's just 10. It's automatic. You're doped up the whole fucking day. That day's gone. Day 2 comes around, get some stool softener, start saying 5s, take a shit and leave. It's that easy. But how do you do that? When it's it's a back, or you know what it's is. So you got everybody in there, and you're like, you know, man, my back hurts. And everybody's like, Jesus Christ, dude, I live with that fucking shit. But say theirs is a 4 or 5, yours is flaming on a 10, but nobody can get in your mindset to know that it's a 10. So you got people saying, dude, what the fuck, you know, just deal with it. And you're like, man, I can't fucking deal with this. I can't even get out of bed. And, you know, neither can I, but they can't get out of bed twice a week. You can't get out of bed to fucking take a shit, you know, or tie your shoes. And that's where that mindset gets really weird at that type of level. I'm sure it's probably that way in the NFL as well, where at Westside, we didn't have like a medical practitioner you took it upon yourself to say, look, this isn't right. I got to go see what's fucked up. You know, we just found anybody that had like a doctor in front of their name. It could have been like
a van.
Yeah, like Doc Dave.
Yeah.
You know, fucking doctor of psychology. It's like, my shoulder okay? You're good. Load it up. Let's go. You know, so that I can see where that would have played a little hell and made things a little worse.
Yeah, but I think, you know, ultimately, like first of all, like it's the fun thing is I'll never forget one of the first times. It wasn't at that Tour de Force, but it was probably, I think, the first meet I did. And I just was sitting. I didn't know anybody from Westside. Like, I'd done the Tour de Force, so I was kind of hanging back, listening to you talk to some people about some stuff. And you're telling these stories about all this crazy shit. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, these people are crazy. I would never do this stuff. I don't know who in their right mind would do this stuff. And now I have like 100 stories worse than anything you told that day in open forum, right? Like, yeah. It's just so funny how that, like, it's just like it's again, it comes back to the perspective thing. Like yeah, like when we talked about it, you know, earlier, like, people say I'm all in, but most people don't fucking know what that means.
Yeah. I think we can let's expand on that, because that was an interesting conversation. We spoke earlier before we were on air. Can I say on air since we're live? Is that like an official thing I can do?
I think you can say on tube.
On tube.
Yeah, there you go.
Or whatever the hell it is. We were talking about it's been something that's been on my mind. I get weird shit that comes in my head for real weird reasons. And one of the things that I've been asking people I know about that have gone all in. I mean, all in. Everybody likes to say they go all in. But when you make something your first priority, that means there is no number 2, number 3, number 4. There is nothing else on the fucking tree. It's a rose with a lot of fucking thorns. It's not a fucking tree.
It's not a tree.
It's a fucking rose with thorns. That's all it is. And when you're all in and you do that and you live that way for a period of time, and that becomes your whole life, you know, when that comes to an end, obviously there's going to be identity crises. There's going to be all kinds of things that kind of go along with that. But the other thing that has been contemplating and occupying my mind is, to be brutally honest about it, it makes me scared to go all in on anything else, because I don't want to lose everything else. And it's not that I become complacent. It's not that I have more, you know, to lose than I had before. It's, you know, that I care. So it's, the whole conversation kind of came about where somebody asked me, do you go 100% all in on your business? And I said, I go in as far as I can. And they said, well, how can you grow your business if you go all in? And I said, do you understand what going all in really means? You know, and when you go all in, that's fucking everything. Now, I got competitors that are going all in, 100% all in. So it fucks with your head, because would the business grow more if I went all in? Is that worth my wife, my kids, my relationship, you know, everything else that goes along with that? Because the way I like to explain it, when my funeral comes, as long as I pass before them, I like to say there's always like 3 or 4 people that are around the casket that their hearts broke. they will think about you for the rest of their entire life. That's my wife and kids. Then there's going to be people that are going to come to support them because of my loss. They're there for them because of that. Then there's a whole lot of other people in the room that are there wondering what time dinner is going to be. When can we leave? How long do we need to stay? They're there for FaceTime. So I don't want to live my life for other people's FaceTime. I want to live my life for the people that are going to be there that really fucking matter. And at this point in my life, going all in would have to be them. So then you can flip that and say, well, then why don't you go 100% all in just for them? Well, I got to fucking feed,
Right.
I got to pay bills too, so it's a fucked up balance. So JL is one of the person, and I'll let him kind of expand on this, that I talked about. And, I called a couple other people as well to get different perspectives on that, because I don't think you really get this unless you've been there and have done exactly what I'm talking about, because it's a fucked up thing if you really think about it. And I have no idea where this is even going, so I'll let you take it up from there.
Yeah, so it's funny. Something just popped into my head. When I walked into Elite FTS today, and Day, we sat down at the table, and the first thing, Day, you look at me, you go, would you go 100% all in on your business today? And I just go, fuck no. And you laughed, and you go, of course, because you get it. And so it's funny, because as you were telling that story, what it brought me back to was when I first started the Spot Athletics. I was 100% all in, because I can't stand the management company that I'm working for. I want to start my own thing. I want to do this. I was 100% all in. To me, I'll never live like that again, because you know what that looks like? When my daughter was born, so Avery was born at 3 a.m. Friday night. At 9 o'clock a.m. Saturday morning, I was in teaching a class at the Spot Athletics. So I left the hospital to be with my newborn, and my wife left to go teach a class at the Spot Athletics. That's fucking 100% all in on your business. And do I regret being 100% all in at that night? No, because it's got me to where we are today. But the whole thing, whether it's powerlifting, once you've really been 100% all in, back at Westside, 100% all into powerlifting, right? There was, at that point, I had conversations with a girlfriend that was longtime girlfriend. If you get in the way of powerlifting, I'll destroy you. Mm-hmm. Right? If you pit yourself against powerlifting, that's not even a decision. Right? And she's crying, and in my head, I'm going, what's wrong with her even thinking that's a decision? Mm-hmm. Really? Because at the time, the fact, the perspective of oh, people are more important than these numbers that I put on the bar. That was what are you talking about? That number is the most fucking important thing in the world. Not my health, right? At that time, my philosophy was, as long as I'm not dead and I can put a bigger number on that fucking bar, I'm in. What do I got to do? Mm-hmm. That's it. And this is why I think people who've been through Westside and people who've excelled, we get together at things and we talk, and it's a common language that I think 1% of 1% can speak and understand. And I think when someone says, oh, I go in all in my business, I worked 43 hours last week. Motherfucker, I worked 43 hours in the last 2 days. That's all in, right? And even at that, you were half-assing because there was 5 more hours you could have fucking worked. And so, to me, that all-in mentality, I don't think many people truly understand it. And so, again, it comes down to perspective and how you see it. But to me, at the end of the day, going 100% all in on things, it is like rocket fuel. It is not sustainable. It is not the way that a long-term life can be built. It's not the way a long-term business can be built. It's not the way. So I went 110% all in. I was pushing every boundary in the world. And if you push every boundary, you're going to cross them, and things are going to break. And sometimes you can repair those breaks, and sometimes you can't. And so I think once you've broken enough of those barriers and you've found some things you couldn't fucking repair, I think then your perspective going 100% all in changes, because you've gotten shit that you haven't been able to fucking repair.
It's still there, and it's still addictive. And I'll throw this back on you. And since powerlifting, we've had hundreds of discussions in regards to each other's business. What is the one thing that I've always asked you in each and every discussion?
Wow. I mean, honestly, the one where you always...
Where do you think I care the most?
My family. You always come back to...
Why do you think that is?
You always come back, every time, come back to my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, no matter
because
what
it's so easy.
Because at the end of the day, and this is, again, perspective, you always bring me back. We can talk for fucking 3 hours about strategy, about business, about training, about that. At the end of the day, the thing you always remind me is all that shit can be taken away when you're fucking dying on your deathbed. Your kids and your wife are the only people that are going to be standing there.
Yes, and that I do that on purpose, to anybody that I really give a fuck about, because that I know can go all in, because it's a slippery slope, dude. I mean, you get hooked up on one thing, it's one idea, one marketing plan, one online thing that you're working on, and boom, you're right there, man. It's like boom, 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 boom. And then it's okay. It's like, okay, you need to make a mental note. Like, when did this fucking start? When do I need to check back? When do I need to see? Because it has to still get done.
Right.
It still has, execution fucking matters. And you still got to be fucking psycho insane to be able to do some of the stuff that people do in business. But at some point in time, there's got to be, and we've been that for each other, somebody to kind of check up. And all it could be is an email saying, hey, dude, how you doing? And I don't need to see anything else except that fucking how are you doing? I don't even need to reply, because it's like, fuck. Fucker knows. He fucking knows. And then it's like pivot, shift, done, and you kind of move from there.
And then sometimes I send you a really nice text, and it's so nice that you send me, are you thinking of killing yourself?
Yeah, that's a weird one. Those don't happen often. We got anything else there from the...
Not so much from the live stream. It's more from Instagram, though. If you want.
All right, yeah.
What are your top 5 books on strength training?
Man, that changes. I'll let you go first on that.
Top 5 books on strength training. So to me, I think that I've shifted so much on this. I think that you can start with basics. So instead of, I think, first of all, one time you and I were having a discussion, man, and I'll never forget this. We were talking about things, people were talking about books, and it's like, oh, like, have you read this new training program? Have you read this? Like, there's certain books that are like the Bible. They're timeless, and everybody should fucking pick it up and take a look. And so the thing that I think people get caught up with is there's so much information today, and it's so easy for anybody to put out information. It's like, I think I lost my headphones. No, there we go. So I think we're in this crazy time that information's so readily available, it's hard for people to know what's good and what's not. So to me, I think if you go back instead of the stuff that's getting published now, because everything that's getting published now, it's just a different take on the stuff that was published 40, 50 years ago. And so to me, I think, even, honestly, like all the stuff that we teach in RPR, a lot of it's been around for thousands of years. We just put it into a really easy system that people can use themselves, right? Like I tell people this all the time, like there's nothing that we invented with RPR. We just simplified a bunch of shit that's been around for thousands of years so that anybody can use the system. So when I would say top 5 books, man, that's really tough. So of course, Super Training, I think's always got to be on there. I think that Super Training is like a college textbook though. So I think if that's what you start with, you're going to really hate books on strength training. Science and Practice of Strength Training. That's one of the ones I always tell people to start with. Honestly, it's funny. I've never read any of Louis. It's funny, right? The Book of Methods and things like that that Louis has. And someone's like, why didn't you read it? And I was like, well, fuck, I lived it. Why the fuck would I read it? Right? Like I ate, slept, breathed it every day. Like, oh, you want Book of Methods? you know how it is with Louis riding to meets. There's no music. All you do is talk training, right? And so you go on a lot of those trips. That's fuck. So, but I would say, like, to me, the place I'm going now, where I've really pivoted, and this is, I don't think programming fucking matters. When I think back, and when I go back, like, everyone right now wants data and programs and sets and reps and percentages and velocities and all this. To me, when I go back and think about our time at Westside and when I'm at my best, it had nothing to do, like, we walked in probably eating some McDonald's, and we said, what do we want to do today? We had a general concept. It wasn't the fucking program. We never wrote one thing down in advance.
The Pitbull calendar.
Yeah, the Pitbull calendar. It was the thing that matters is the coaching. Every single rep you did in there, every single rep, there was fucking 10 eyeballs on that, and just every little minor thing. Your knee was off a quarter inch, your foot was off a quarter inch, like your head was down a quarter inch wrong. I mean, everything was incessantly coached. And so where I've gotten to on books is, like, I see these young coaches come in and they've got all this technical information, they've got all this, they can't communicate any of it. So to me, if you want to know like, not like for strength training for yourself, but if you're coaching, if you're a strength conditioning coach, a personal trainer, the number one book you can read to really be a great strength conditioning coach, a great personal trainer, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Learn how to fucking communicate with people. And that's one of the seminal books that pretty much every book ever written about how to communicate, how to do sales was taken from principles from that book. And so to me, like, that's what really matters. It's how you communicate with people. Because honestly, it doesn't fucking matter what you know. It's how you can communicate it to people. Like, one of my favorite sayings is, if information was valuable, libraries would be the richest place on earth. It's not the information, it's how it gets communicated. And so to me, what I see the biggest lack is these people are so caught up in numbers and data and this and that, they've lost track of the greatest tool in the weight room that a coach can have, and that's the fucking questions you ask. How you doing today, Dave? How you feeling? There's no more greater fucking tool than your question. That's it. The question's the ultimate tool in the weight room. And so for me, when I look at the greatest books, like, yes, there's a million different books that you can read, and it's great, but honestly, until you've got that communication down, none of it fucking matters. And I'll be honest, like, where I'm going lately, so I just brought a group of people in, and they just wrote a book and created a software, and it's called ReadyFit, and it's about lifestyle coaching. And this is really where I'm going. So you want to talk about how to win friends and influence people? ReadyFit. It breaks down life, because here's the thing we both know. We worked with the same population of people. We affect people for 1, maybe 2 hours a day when we're training, but what they do in the other 23 hours, that's what fucking matters. And so what the cool part with ReadyFit is, like, I started doing lifestyle coaching with them because, like, what I deal with all the same shit that my clients deal. I own 2 businesses, right? Like, I want to get my training. I started doing. So to me, like, I really believe in 5 years from now, if you're a coach and if you're not reading on how to communicate better, how to deal with people's lifestyles, because all that other shit is so fucking physiology, right? Like, how to do a squat, that shit ain't changing, right? But the dynamic of our world is changing. The way people communicate is changing. And so to me, How to Win Friends, Influence People, ReadyFit is on lifestyle coaching. Like, to me, like, that's where I start with my coaches. Right, when my coaches come in, we have books you have to read, and so we have levels of coaching, and all of them are none of them are about training. They're fucking about personal development. It's things like extreme ownership, How to Win Friends, Influence People, ReadyFit, right? Shit that has to do with communicating and being a better person, because ultimately that's the shit that's going to get people far in the sport. Is that training hard doesn't make you better. Recovering from training makes you better. And so that's where the lifestyle shit comes in. And so to me, I know it was a roundabout answer to that question. It wasn't just a quick list, but to me, that's how I view it now. And that's totally changed, because 15 years ago, I'd have rattled off 5 books. These are my top 5. Yeah. These are on my shelf.
I would add one thing to what you said, and I don't think it's that you forgot to mention it. I just think that it just didn't come out in the way that you answered. The ability to read nonverbal communication. Yeah. That's key. You know, from the way somebody walks into the gym, and you don't need to go study 8,000 books on that. You just watch how the client walks in. One day they walk in different than normal. You know, why? But that falls back again on your question. How was your day? You know, the answer to that, you may not even need to read the nonverbal communication, but you can pick up a lot from the nonverbal communication aspect.
No, I think that's, when I look at communication, you know, obviously you're right.
It's everything.
It didn't come up. It is that the nonverbal, right? Because people don't have awareness, right? So I say, hey, Dave, I watch you walk in. I don't have to ask you how you're doing. I know how you're doing. I ask you just to see how full of shit you are, right? Like, yes. I already know by watching you walk how you feel. And so that's where, you know, to me, like, people are like, oh, how do you assess people? Like, I just watch them move. Like, I can watch anybody walk and pretty much tell you what's going on with them. And so I think people want this data and they want this, but like, fuck, the best data collection tools are your eyes, your ears. Fuck, that shit is amazing.
And this is on floor internship, valuable advice that most people just take for granted, and they don't learn. They don't ask the coaches, like, why did you change that? Well, your answer could simply be, I don't like the way they ran through the line on that fourth one.
Yeah. Well, I saw on a thing, someone asked a question about, like, what do you look for in your coaches or something at the Spot Athletics? I don't give a shit about degrees. I don't give a shit about certifications. I give a shit, can you communicate with people, right? Like, do you care about people? And can you communicate with people? Because I can teach you sets. I can teach anybody in the world the sets and reps and how to do exercises. If you can't communicate it, and if you don't care about people, that's all I care about. Because if I can't teach you to care, and I can't teach people to communicate properly, like, that's something they've got to want to do on their own. And so if they don't have those two skills, I don't give a shit if you've got a fucking 10 PhDs in exercise science. You're not coming in my facility and working with people. Yes. So that I mean, and I know that wasn't maybe the answer that person wanted for.
Well, you know what? I'll bring it back though to the book question. From a motivation.
Under the Bar by Dave Tate.
Yeah.
Under the Bar 2 by Dave Tate.
Yeah, Raising the Bar.
Raising the Bar.
And that's a dark one. You don't want to read
those twice. That's 4 books.
All motivation books basically have their root in the Bible. So I'll just leave that as what it is and keep it from there. So you can read all the motivation books you want in the world, you know, all the answers that you need to know. Just read a little bit deeper. When it comes to the training perspective, here's why I'm answering this question where I would typically kind of blow it off the way that JL just did. Where we are in a really weird realm right now where we have a lot of highly educated people who are producing really good content. And I don't care if these highly educated people that produce great content look like shit or don't have clients to support their data. The data is good. Their information is good. There's a lot of really good stuff that's being put out there today. A lot of research reviews that are great. I subscribe to all of them. I can't read them all, but I skim through them all.
You look at pictures.
Yeah, but the biggest thing that I see from a global, not global, but from an industry perspective is I think there's a problem when people don't know the difference between volume and workload. You know, volume is, these are simple concepts. You know, volumes is sets times reps. Volume. Workload, sets times reps times load. Workload. These are things that, you know, 30, 40 years ago would never get fucking confused or mixed up. They would get checked off with red ink on your CSCS exam, but now they're interchangeably used. Which if something so fucking simple can be interchangeably used, then there's an underlying problem as far as the education and the dissemination of the education. So then it needs to reel back to, if you're a strength and conditioning coach or you want to be a strength and conditioning coach or even a effective personal trainer, you still need to have some type of solid program. I don't think it needs to be to the degree that most people think it is. Most of the trainers and coaches I know will never use the top 10%, 20% of their knowledge. They're going to use, I'm sorry, 90% they're never going to use. So the skill set that they've worked so hard to develop and to utilize, being able to take that top level strength athlete and get them 1 step, 1 degree stronger, they're never going to use.
No, it's so funny you say that. Like, people ask me about, pro, what do you do with this? It's like, it's all pretty basic. Like, I bench press 500 pounds and I didn't even know that you could go below 5 reps, right? Like, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, see what you can do, right? Like, it was linear. It was just automatic. Like, you don't need that much information to make great progress. You need consistency and hard work and adherence to a program. Whatever program it is, it doesn't really matter. But it's funny, basically, like, the way I always put it, like what you said about not using it, I always put it, most people are at a level 1. So if you're at a level 1.5 of knowledge, you're an expert to 99% of people in the world. People like us who've gotten to like a level 9 or 10 or however you want to quantify that, we're never going to use levels 2 through 10. We really only need level 1.5 to be successful. And so it was cool. Like, last year I had a kid who, genetic freak, he was the number 1 football recruit in the country, right? And so, amazing kid, great parents, yes sir, no sir. And I trained this kid last winter, and I got to use, like, this kid's a genetic freak. Like, he'll be a freshman at Ohio State. He's crushing it. He's just an amazing kid, right? God gives you athletic ability. Like, parents make you a great kid, right? And so, but the cool part for me was, like, you know what? I could use layer 7, 8, 9 with this kid because he was such a genetic freak. But that's a 1 in a million kid. Like, I won't use level 9 of my knowledge again for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I won't see a kid like that again. Maybe never, ever.
Yes. And for those that want to learn the levels, I mean, the pristine, the best athlete that you'd ever want to work with optimally would be to be able to have that person for a quadrennial. So you have complete control, which basically means that's very rare and it's not going to happen. But you have to understand different types of periodization. All right. So everybody knows programs now. All right, they know 5-3-1, they know jailhouse method, they know Westside method, they know the 5th set, they know, I can go on and on and on and on and on. But when I ask them what basis of periodization is each one of those methods grounded in, and the student cannot tell me, then that tells me they don't know dick about training. So to backtrack on all that, the education process should, of the individual, because I don't know what's going on in institutions anymore. This could be taught. It's been a long time, so I'm not going to make a definitive statement there. But everybody should take the time to learn what just basic linear periodization is, the Western method of periodization, which is just, you can search it. I'm not going to go into details about it. Everybody should know what, a conjugate / concurrent, it's kind of the same thing. They should know what that type of periodization model is. Everybody should know what a block periodization model is. Everybody should know variations of that. So out of the linear, you're going to have undulating periodization. You're going to have nonlinear periodization. Out of, conjugate, you're going to have different systems there, which almost kind of echo block. Out of block, you're going to have that. Then you're going to have just basic bodybuilding training, right? Which has its own quasi laws, which are the room for variance and the room for error is much larger. And I also think that in there, people should take the time to try to learn basic HIIT training protocols, because that's where a lot of things like the training economy, dog crap, there's a lot of things that stem underneath that, which, keep in mind, anybody that writes a program that falls underneath or that's kind of a part of any one of these periodization models, every author will deny the fact that it's part of one of those models, which is bullshit, because it's just the way it is. Now, the only caveat I would throw in there is, conjugate never really was a conjugate term until Louis started using it. It was more like a concurrent type of term, maybe a little bit of conjugate. used interchangeably. So I've always kind of fallen in the wheelhouse that conjugate is Westside. So I can see where there's confusion with that. But there are other models of people who would use basically block training that's more transitional. I don't want to get too technical because you guys need to go read all this shit. That's got more transitional sections in there.
More integrated.
Transitional blocks, integrations, carry throughs. There's a lot of different things that fall in that. And resources for that is, I'm gonna pimp out our site. I mean, over the past couple months, we've stripped down pretty much everything in our book section except for the type of books that I'm talking about. So Super Training, I think, is definitely a book that's worth reading, only for one reason, because most people are better at board pressing with it than they are reading it, because it's frustrating. And I did not do well in college. I had to read that book 5 or 6 times before I actually picked up a notebook and started highlighting it. And then I went to the next step and started taking notes on the book. And then the next step, taking my notes to Mel Sift to be able to see from there. It took me 2.5 years in between my clients to be able to disseminate and get through the information that was in there. Now, had I paid more attention in college, it might not have been as hard. But the first part of that book was a bitch for me because that was all the stuff that I didn't pay attention to like I should have in college. If you just want to get to the meat and potatoes, skip the first part, go right to the back, that will whet your appetite, for a lot of the different methods of training that you can see for overcoming sticking points and all the other kind of stuff. But just because all this is out there doesn't mean you have to use it all. When you look at the best successful programs that are out there, they're not that complicated. But the person who did the writing of it knows a hell of a lot more than what you think they do. They just had to go through that whole learning process to be able to figure out these are the parts that I know how to implement best through my communicational skill set and my own physical skill set and my background, in training athletes, because everybody's system is going to be based upon themselves. And the coach has to work on developing themselves and their own training philosophy. I'm not saying you're going to make a Westside. You're not going to make a 5-3-1. I'm saying you're going to have a philosophy based upon a lot of the things that JL just touched on. Your ability to read people. If it sucks, then you're going to have to fall back on a different ability to be able to make up for that. If it's really good, and then you're going to be able to tune down what, training volume perhaps, or some other section or skill set. And I'll just leave it with that. So learn block training, learn linear training, learn conjugate training, learn HIIT training, and learn basic bodybuilding protocols, which most people should already know.
What I love, so you touched on all of that, and then you said HIIT, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
The reason is because when I came up, and you did the same thing, what did we do ourselves? We did some HIIT training. We did some bodybuilding. We did some block. We obviously did a lot of conjugate, right? And so we did linear periods. So the thing that I think people forget is, like, I did linear. Everything, like all the programs, all those bases, if you haven't trained at least a 12-week block of each of those, you have no right to even talk about them, right? Like, you can read about them, right? But until you've done at least a 12-week block of each of those things to really feel it, you can't form a philosophy, right? Because what are you going to tell someone to do something you've never done before? That it's not going to go real well.
I mean, and out of, let's say, HIIT, now you got fortitude training, which is Scott Stevenson, then you got dog crap training. So you got variations of each one of those, where before I came to Westside, I would do a meet, then I took a month off after the meet because it was a linear progression. And then I didn't want to train. It's like, fuck, you take a month off after training. It's like, I don't want to go to the gym. Your whole mind's different. And it was the best thing I could do because I was in and out of the gym. I trained really fucking hard. I put on a lot of muscle really fast. And then I would start getting ready for, okay, I need to start getting pre-ready for the next meet, kind of go that route. And it worked for a while. And I like that kind of training because it's hard. And there's always somebody. What I like about the training process that people complain about is how people try to redefine the wheel. I like people redefining the wheel because if you know the structure of the wheel, you can see if they're really fucking something up or if they're actually onto something that makes kind of some logical sense.
Yep. I love it.
Like with Dante, the rest pause was a huge thing with him.
Yep.
I'm like, wow, I never really thought that much about rest pause except for, just an intensity principle that you would have with HIIT training. Right. But wow, this has taken it to another level as far as the Perillo used to do the extreme stretching. And it's like, I love when people do stuff like that. And that's what I wish people would spend more time kind of looking and trying to disseminate, but having that educational mindset to be able to see what they're actually looking at.
Yeah. Well, it's just, knowing if you don't have perspective, then you read a book and you go, oh, this is this, but you don't realize what it's come from, right? It's like you're talking to someone's great grandson trying to get the information that the grandpa passed down.
Yeah, I have a question here that was passed on that in regards to bands and chains. Now, this was passed on to me from our office because we're trying to put together a band and chain manual, which we'll be giving away for free. And we have some holes in it. So let's go with your answer on how do you figure out the best percentages for band and chain use?
So I think with bands, a big thing is how you set them up. I think that's one, is being consistent in how you set them up. I think that's where a lot of people are like, oh, this band tension isn't very bad. And then you look at the setup and you're like, you don't even have it choked, right? And so I think one, how you set them up and being consistent with that is the most important part, because we're not talking apples to apples if everyone's setting it up different. The next part of it is looking at what qualities I'm trying to train. So if I'm trying to train, speed strength quality, right, then I'm going to go with a much lower percentage than if I'm trying to train a strength speed phase.
For the listeners, can you define both of those real quick?
Yeah, so just a lot of this, I know like the popular term now is velocity-based training, and obviously Brian Mann's done a ton of great research, and I love Brian. But it's funny because I talk to these people and they're like, well, this speed and this speed. And I was like, well, guess what? If you do this shit enough, you should just be able to look at it and know where you're at, right? And that, to me, like, that's mastery, right? Like, I would love, like, you go into Westside and people are squatting with bands on, right? Louis knows exactly how fast you're moving and what you should be, and everyone else in there did, right? We knew, right? Hey, you need more band tension for this quality. You need less band tension. It's really simple, but basically you're looking at the velocities that people are moving the bar to train a certain quality. And so when you use accommodating resistance, one of the cool features is that, let's say you put 135 pounds on the bar and you watch the velocity of the bar. So you move it at a certain speed. Well, then if you put the right band tension on that bar with 135 pounds, which technically makes it heavier, now you actually move the bar faster because of the stored kinetic energy from the band. And so when we're looking at that, when we're looking at strength speed, we're looking at a lot of tension or a lot of accommodating resistance moving the bar at a slower pace. We're looking at speed strength. We're looking at that tension or that accommodating resistance actually amplifying the speed and making you faster. So that's kind of a really basic rundown of what I'm talking about there.
Okay.
So to me, with tension, it really, and whether it's bands or chains, it comes down to what quality am I trying to work. And so I look at the percentage in that. And so what's going to get me to the speed I need the best way? So I'm looking at optimal, right? Like you can throw like so much accommodating resistance on there, and then all you're doing is just doing a max effort movement with a bunch of accommodating resistance. And so that can be a thing too. Mm-hmm. But I think that like when we're looking at these and we're looking at percentages, you can have a range of percentages. And generally what I like to do is like, I'm not a big fan of crossing, especially like if we're doing speed strength work, it's going to be under 25% of load is about where we're going to stay. If we start going to strength speed, we can start getting up to like 50% of load. And so those are really rough because everybody's different. And so like I remember, we tendo unit on Chuck and I'm super, super explosive lifter. So Chuck, his squat was higher than mine, but as we moved the weight up, I could move heavier weight faster than he could. So when we're looking at the speeds, it is dependent on the person and the lifter. The thing I'll say with bands and chains, which is amazing that people really miss, is that if you are a grinder lifter, you need lower straight weight and a little more accommodating resistance to allow you to move and get your nervous system to move at the speed you need to improve your performance factors. So I think that's just something too to think about. And if you're a more explosive person, then you need a little bit less of the accommodating resistance and more of the straight weight to improve the things that are lacking in your strength curve.
Okay, the way that I usually go, well, let's go with chains. Run with chains. So you just did the band, so go ahead and how would you put chains in there?
So chains to me, it's a much different. So percentage wise, I stay about the same for the areas. The difference is I look at chains is a totally different thing. Like it starts to when you start using light chain, like low chains, you really are working stability. But as you load more and more chains on, you actually start to restabilize things. So this is an interesting thing with chains that I don't think people take into consideration is that if I have 2 or 3 chains on, now I've got to use more stability with that. I load like 10 chains on and it actually restabilizes the bar. And that's one thing people with bands is that it locks you in. So first once you learn how to stabilize, bands do the same kind of thing. Like one green band and it's like, whoa, I got to stabilize this. You throw like 2 blacks on there, it's like nothing moves and it just does it for you. And so I think chains are the same way and people don't think about like, oh no, more stability. It's like 10 of them. Like, no, you just restabilize the bar. And so I think there's a sweet spot with chains that sometimes people can get a little bit overzealous with and be like, well, if 3 is good, then 6 must be twice as good. Well, maybe not. And so to me, when I'm looking at that, I always got a lot stronger. Like if people are big, like explosive lifters, chains I feel like help them a lot more with their lifts. Whereas if people are more grinders, I feel like bands help them more because it teaches them how to be faster. Whereas the people who are more explosive need to learn how to grind more. So that's kind of how I look at like applying bands and chains in a very general sense.
The funny thing that went through my mind when you were talking about that was, I remember when we were at Westside, Louis it was extreme, bands and chains. So there would be like, he had that big 4x4 and a 100-pound dumbbell and 8,000 other things underneath there to make the bands tighter. But he would have 3 blues, a green, and a purple. It's like 700-pound fucking band with a bar.
Yeah.
And you go to stand up and you're like, oh my God, you're fucking going to die. So it got to the point where, for me, it's like I'm not even starting until there's 245 on there. Because as soon as you started putting more weight on there, it started to ground it a little bit, and it wasn't such this huge clusterfuck. What I do with the people that I speak to when it comes to bands and chain usage is I try to make it super, super simple, and I stay away from the strength, speed, strength. I let that all kind of become more intermediate, advanced type of information because there's so many people giving different percentages, on what they should use for 3 weeks, say dynamic work. And those percentages can range from 25% to 60% for week 1.
I say 30 to 60, but
yeah, so they're all over the map. So it becomes very confusing to people. So what I do to try to even the playing field is to remind everybody it's based upon force development. As you said, it's all based upon speed. According to, super training, and I'm sure I can, if I really gave a fuck enough, I can go look up studies and validate where absolute maximum explosive strength is going to be displayed. Typically, with just straight barbell weight, it's going to be somewhere between 50 to 70%, somewhere in that range. So I will tell people, start with a mini band, a light band, based upon whatever your strength is. Most people agree on the band tension, right? The percentages are all over the place, but they agree on the band tension. So just start with that and do a couple sets at 45%. And just, how's it feel? What's it look like? Do a couple sets at 50%. Do a couple sets at 55%, 60%, 65%. At some point in time, it's going to slow down. Now, if it goes from 45% to 65% and you're still moving at a good click, and then at 70 it drops, all right, that didn't even count as a workout, by the way. That's just a test. Now we know you can wave from 45 to 65%. So week 1, 45, week 2, 55, week 3, 65. There's your 3-week wave, done, based upon that person. And then as they become, and their motor abilities become better with the bands and the chains, then they're going to be able to fall into the demographics of the people that are recommending the percentages. You're recommending the percentages based upon athletes you're working with. Louis is recommending the percentages based upon athletes he's working with, which is another level of athlete with a lot of experience with bands. Other people are using, different demographics. So let's figure it out just based upon that. Make it easy. When it comes to the chains and the bands essentially kind of do the same thing, but not really. I've always said the bands deload into you, the chains deload onto the floor. So the tension, your weight at the top should be the same, for each. It's just on the chain, there's going to be no real tension or nothing at the bottom. If so, just a little bit. I always like to be able to tell the stupid people in the industry, because they're the ones that when you watch them use chain and you figure each link weighs about a pound, you see like a 6-pound decrease from top to bottom.
Or what about the one long chain?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's the worst.
Yes. Now the only time I can justify that there might be some intelligence there is if the chain never touches the ground. Then it's stability. Yeah. So
but with the one long one, it touches the ground as soon as you start moving, but it's like one link instead of 2 links, and nothing really.
It's like 2 pounds. It's like crazy. So from that setup standpoint, I think that's easy. Now with the reverse band, I'll talk more about that when we get into the longevity part, because I've played around a lot with that. The reverse band, I think, for the beginners and the group that we're talking about, just keep it simple. Use the bands that you have. You don't have to go buy a new band to have reverse strong bands. Most our reverse band, I think, was light, and average. But I do think that it can go too far and sometimes not enough. Like, you don't want to have a 300-pounder doing reverse band future method squats to where they have 700 pounds at the top.
Well, I think, too, when you were talking about loading up the bands, you were talking about like moving the weight. What I like to do is like, okay, what band is right for you? And so like that, just another way of looking at that is like taking that weight, like, okay, like whatever your squat is, take a percentage of that. I don't really care, 40%, 50%, and then change bands. And so what's cool is when you do that and you're looking at bar speed, when you get to the right band, like when you're at a, like say like a mini, you won't really change much. Then you go to an average, you get a little faster. Go to another one, you get a little faster. You go to the next one, you slow down.
Same session or different session?
Same session. Okay. Is just to figure out what band should you use.
I like that.
And so like I've done that with people, and I really like how that is, because one, it gets them to understand the concept of what we're trying to do. And two, they're like, oh, that didn't feel any fast. Oh God, that got faster. That got slower. Awesome. You were on that band. Use that band all during your training, then wave the weights.
Now let's say that we did both of what we're saying. Yep. That we did what I'm talking about for weight.
Find the band first, then find the weights.
Band first, then the weight.
Find the weights.
That's perfect. Because that takes all guesswork out for the squat and for the bench.
Yeah. And then once you do that, you have it. You're done.
Yeah.
And now you train, and then maybe, a year later you could test it again or something. You know what I mean? But basically you're good.
Yes. Because this is another conversation you're dealing with, beginner athletes, and you're also dealing with high-end athletes. High-end athletes have very, very strong explosive components. Yep. Does that get better? So there's question number one: can that get better?
With
that's
that
debated.
Person, and what I'll say is, with that person, with just for me, I never needed to get more explosive, but my absolute strength needed to go up. So to me, it's like you train the quality that person is weak in. That's where you're going to see the biggest bang for your buck, always.
Yes, I was the same way. I was more explosive than I was strong. But if I backed off the speed work and it fell even a little bit, I was toast because I wasn't strong.
Right.
So, but what I found...
Keep your strength strong, build your weaknesses.
Yeah, what I found after leaving Westside, where I had a little bit more play, is I didn't have to do speed work all the time. I could let it fall a little bit, hit a 3-week phase, and I'd be able to hold it for 6 weeks and then bring it back in again. But that's being a person that's very, very explosive, and vice versa, where The counter debate, I guess, to this would have been J.M. Blakely, who would say he didn't need speed work because he was already way fast enough. So it was pointless because he couldn't make himself more explosive, which may be true, may not be true, but he could get stronger.
Yeah, I think as you age, that changes. Your nervous system slows down as you age. So to me, people are like, oh, like, look, our 13-year-old athletes at the spot, like, they're not doing speed work. They're jumping, they're throwing, but we're not putting bands and chains or really even, like, we're building absolute strength because that's where they suck. And so, like, but as you age, that changes. Like, I would argue for most general population people, honestly, for the most part, depending if you've lived any kind of active life, when you're 35, 40 years old, for general pop, not power lifters, for general pop, their absolute strength probably doesn't really need to get much better, but they need to move better. They need to be more explosive. We need to keep their nervous systems fresh, right? And so, like, it shifts too as you age. Like, right now, like, you know, when I was 25, I did, like, speed work, like, I was like you. I didn't need to do it all the time to stay really fast. Now, if I drop speed work off, my lifts go to shit because I need that speed's what I rely on.
No athlete ever retires because they weren't strong enough. They retire because they lose a step.
Or they get hurt.
Well, yeah, or they get hurt. They get hurt. The next question that goes along with this deals with, you know, how to use bands and chains for sport longevity. I'll kind of kick this one off and then let you take it from what you know. With my battered and beat body, dealing with titanium hips, which, I mean, there's a couple things I want to kind of put out there just to alleviate any misunderstanding. Just because you get a hip replaced or you get a joint replaced does not mean that wear and tear goes away. You know, wear and tear is wear and tear. Wear and tear is still wear and tear of a healthy joint. So if you have a healthy joint that is bone on bone, or that is bone on bone spur, or bone on bone spur, which is grinding into a labrum or something of that sort, any movement, regardless of the movement, is wear and tear, which is going to just further degenerate the joint. But you can't not do anything. So I'm talking healthy joints here. So one of the worst things that I did when my hips were bad was a shit ton of mobility work of very high reps, because all I was doing was trying to start a fire with my femur and hip joint, you know, and it got so bad that it fractured the joint. So I'm not telling people not to do anything. When I'm telling people, if they're dealing with hip problems or they're dealing with shoulder problems, it is vitally important to know exactly what you're dealing with and how much space is in there, because a little space can go a long fucking way. A little space can give you a lot of room for movement, a lot of room for physical therapy, a lot of room for all kinds of things to be able to free up that joint and allow it to move better and allow better range of motion. When that starts to get capped in there and locked or frozen, then you start to get to a point that's called fucked. And then you have to figure out how to train through fucked, where I'm fucked. Now, when that joint is replaced, yes, you do get a little unfucked. But let's say, you know, a hip replacement, just to throw a number at it, has 100,000 moves. Every time you move, you're clicking that timer down. So when that was one of the first discussions I had with my orthopedic is, okay, you're 45. This should last you 10 to 15 years. My reply was, it's going to last me 10 because I'm not going to go easy to try to get 15. And then it was, well, based upon current technologies, you know, we can do this twice. You know, the third time becomes real iffy. If there is a third time, it's probably going to be a wheelchair or a cane. So not to be morbid, you start doing the math in your head, trying to figure out when you're going to die, how hard you can push everything, and come up with a plan from there. So for my hips, it's like 10 years. I'm going to train it hard, but I'm going to be fucking smart. So people see things that I do, high box squats with the spider bar. Like, what the hell? This guy's had a hip replacement. He's a complete idiot. So I'll throw back at you and say, did you realize that my knee hip angle is above 90 degrees. So it's in the least vulnerable position there possibly can be. Did you realize that there's reverse bands on the bar? So it's deloaded at the bottom, which allows me to have more load at the top. Why do I want more load at the top? I want to have the best joint stability environment I can create, because I want my hips to be strong if I slip or if anything's to happen, strong, stable. And I also want to be in the best position to create the highest degree of bone density and to keep the bone density I have. And I don't ever want to put myself in a compromised position to where both of my knees could go in or one of my knees could go in to be able to pop the replacement out. Oh shit, Dave sounds like a fucking genius now. He's not just out there trying to lift a ton of weight. So a lot of that came about through, first off, giving credit to where credit's due to Louie with the accommodating resistance. My shoulder's fucked up too, so I'm not going to ever take straight weight all the way down to the most vulnerable position that creates the greatest pain. That's going to be deloaded as much as I can, either with chains or bands. I choose the chains or bands depending upon what one hurts, what one doesn't. For my shoulder, bands hurt like a motherfucker. Nothing against the slingshot, but that hurts like a motherfucker. It helps a ton of people, but my issue is in the lower position with that extreme stretch. If it was in a higher position, it would probably be a great training tool. The chains are phenomenal. Reverse band on the bench with the shoulder saver is great. So I didn't have to give up the movements I love to do. I just got to use a yoke bar because I can't hold the bar. But I will not, I don't want to say that because I will. If I do a straight weight spider bar squat with no accommodating resistance, it's going to be part of a very structured, laid out plan like I did a few years ago, which JL helped me enable, which led into, it was a year-long plan. So, and it led into a 6-week peak to be able to hit what I wanted to be able to hit, which I was able to do. So it was a long-term plan with a lot of thought that went into it, not just let's just go fucking see what I can do type of thing. And it was at a risk, but my other hip still needed to be replaced. So to me, it was like, fuck it, it's worth the risk. If anything, it will knock my other hip out earlier, so I'll be able to get it done. I would not do it now though, because now both the hips are replaced and I do have to worry about, I'm not trying to knock these things out in 5 years. Don't get me wrong. I want to get 10 years out of each one.
I think you can do it in 4.
Yeah, no, I could. If I lowered the box and did a lot of the stupid shit.
If you weren't being a pussy, I'm just saying.
But I do think that when it comes to longevity, longevity is a weird question, because when do you start that definition of longevity? Do you start that at you're fucked up and now you want to just keep training in a fucked up state? Or do you start that as, I'm a lifter coming into the sport and I want to stay in the sport for the longest time period possible? Because to me, if you're a lifter coming into the sport and you want to stay into it for the longest time possible, then you're just a hobby lifter. And I wish all the greatest to you, but you will eventually get your ass kicked by somebody who just wants to be great. As long as you're okay with that, that's fine. Most people don't come into a sport competitively thinking, I want to be able to do this for the rest of their lives. They come into the sport thinking, I want to be the best, and don't even think about the consequences that are going to happen after that time period comes. When that time period is over and you have to deal with the carnage and the damage, which some of it can be mitigated, genetics play a role. A great genetic athlete I don't think is going to get as beat up as one that's not, but I'm going to make a lot of assumptions here. I also think they're going to quit sooner because they haven't been through the trials and the tribulations and the adversity of the person that had to grind to get where they were. The person that had to grind to get where they were, if they're in any type of top level sport, are going to be the people that you got to drag off the fucking field. Now, if you can combine that person with a genetic person, you got a 1 in a million. I mean, that's a key thing. But just as far as general sport longevity, or to redefine the question, dealing with athletes who are no longer athletes that still want to kind of train like athletes, I'm going to turn that over to JL.
So I think one thing that I think is, a little different in my perspective is that going through my history and what I went through, I think that you can actually train in a really smart way and be great and be the best and not have all the injuries and the setbacks. If you're pushing the envelope and you're trying to be the absolute best, you're going to push the envelope past its edge and have some things. But I think part of that is having people around you who can hold you to certain standards and pull you back. And that's what, for me.
Not to interrupt, but that's not part of it. That's all of it. Without that, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget, right? And this is the one thing, I don't remember a lot of things, but this is one of those deals that just crystal clear. I was at the WPO competing against Goggins, and he came up and was like, "Oh, you're doing these great things. You're doing this. You just got to be careful. Your numbers are coming up so fast. You might want to take some time." And to me, I had great people like that around trying to warn me. I remember George Halbert having a great discussion with me about it. And honestly, my response in my head to all those guys were like, "Fuck, you're just mad because I'm stronger than you," right? I wasn't in a place where my ego would allow the great people around me to allow me to get out of the way of myself. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one thing. I think that if you're in that position where you want to be great, listening to some people around you that are a little older, a little wiser, and getting rid of the ego will do you a lot of good.
Yeah, if the same message is coming from multiple people, you might want to listen a little bit.
Maybe. And from people that are world champions.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say, we use, at the Spot Athletics, we use especially chains quite a bit to help with, because for people especially we have a ton of people that want to train hard and get stronger and move better. Our philosophy, number one, is build better movement. And what I love about chains is that it really minimizes a lot of the risk, because when you're bench pressing, when's the risk? When you're down in the hole, right? When you're squatting, when's the risk? When you're down in the hole. So when we're at the more extreme ranges of the joint, it's deloading the weight, so it's much better. And obviously, like you said, when we get to the top, the weight's heavier, so it's helping with bone density and all these things that we really care about. So I'm a huge fan of change for this. Not for bands, though. Well, reverse band, yes. But actual bands, I don't like it at all, because it's at bands, like you said, they hurt. I think, like you said, bands deload into your body. That's a stress on your body. Whereas chains deload in the floor. It's apples and oranges. It's totally two different things. So for me, when I'm looking at actually adding accommodating resistance, chains are awesome for longevity. Bands are not great for longevity. Reverse bands, great for longevity. So those are kind of just my short intakes. Obviously, you elaborated on a lot of that, but that's kind of just my short synopsis of that.
I agree with the bands, because I've tried to do short cycles with the bands, and they just, against the bands, and they beat the shit out of me. Yep. The one thing that I found with reverse bands, though, is on some movements I'm obviously stronger than others. And the one thing that clicked with me in the past year was, when you look at squatting against bands, there's a set band tension that you're going to squat against, say 40%, whatever it's going to be, whatever is set up for. But with the reverse band, the percent was never taken into consideration. Right. So I started looking, because it's easier to look because you just pop the bar off and see what it is. And I'm like, well, there's really only 150-pound variation on this 800-pound lift from top to bottom. That sucks compared to, say, Lily, who I have doing the same band, that's got a 30% variation. Right. So I need to take the reverse band up. And so that's one thing I've been playing with a little bit. But that gets a little into a scary territory for somebody like a Joe Sullivan or somebody who's really strong, because what the hell is going to be there? 1350 at the top, right. Crazy shit that I don't know if you need that much joint stability for what, he wants to do. But I do think that's one variable with reverse bands that's not really thought about. It's just kind of like throw the light band over the top, throw the average band over the top. If they're not so strong, throw a light band over the top, where in going full circle with it, I don't know if it really fucking matters, which is, you always got to question, you know what I'm saying? It's one of the takeaways from the whole conversation today is you come up with ideas and you got to question your ideas and then question them again and kind of go in full circle and kind of see how it goes. But any other things from?
A couple things. You mentioned in the Instagram thing that we were going to give away some gift cards.
I would just do that randomly. I would just pick people's names.
Do you want to announce it on here, or do you want to just message them?
I'll message them.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about that, right?
Yeah, because I'm going to have to get their email address and all kinds of shit like
I
that.
have at least one for JL here.
Okay.
Let me look real quick. How has your training at Westside influenced the way you train younger athletes? And has your way of training changed since Westside? Obviously it has, but if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so the question is, how has my training at Westside influenced the way that I train younger athletes, and kind of how has my training changed? I would say that the biggest thing is, when I got to Westside, I wasn't a super experienced powerlifter by any means. But Dave, what was your best total?
What at Westside?
Just ever.
2210.
Okay, I totaled 2160 in my first meet. And so, like, just perspective wise, right? Like, my second meet was 22. I don't know, it was bigger than whatever your total was, right? So, like, that came up really fast. But what I probably don't talk about a lot is that I started lifting when I was 15. So at that point, I had 8 years or 8 years.
You had good training partners too.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about Chad Walker and Croc and crazy fuckers.
Yeah. So Ferris put out some strong people. Shout out to Ferris State University. It's funny. People don't realize, right? Like, so I grew up, Josh McMillan and I grew up together, and then went to school with Croc and Chad Walker. Like, it's funny, like, how it all, I don't know, something in the water up there. But I think one of the things that's interesting is that, probably going to take this question in a way that people don't probably think about, but probably the biggest way that Westside influenced the way that I train myself, young athletes, everybody at the Spot Athletics, and our philosophy in general, is that Louis really opened me up to learning and examining and testing new things. And the thing that I loved about being at Westside was an idea that was, this is how we do it on a Tuesday, might be completely different on a Friday. And I mean, things were constantly changing, constantly evolving. And for me, that's probably the biggest thing. I'll never forget I went, it's like 2000, I think, something like that. It was Mel Siff and Louis Simmons in Las Vegas. And it was just it was this tiny, just broom closet. And it was like all these guys I still know today, right? Like Buddy Morris was there, and Joe Ken and Mark Bell and Mark Uyama, all these guys that I still talk to. And so it's funny because I'll never forget, there was a power lifter there with his kid. And the kid was 15 years old, and he had a pretty good bench press. Whatever it was for a 15-year-old, it was pretty good. And we were at lunch. And Louis spent the entire lunch asking this 15-year-old kid what he was doing to get his bench so good. And I'll never forget that. And that's a lesson for me that I was like, I never want to lose that as long as I live. And that is just the curiosity on how can I keep improving what I'm doing. And that's really what I've taken into Westside. And it's interesting, from Westside and into the Spot Athletics, is that, like, when it comes to the squat, and obviously I wrote like the whole article series last year about the squat and how we were really messing it up and ignoring the ankle. And, so now when I look at my young athletes and how I squat them and train them, I don't give a shit how much weight they lift. I care about making them a better athlete. And so that came around because the things, and so it's funny, so many people, they look at the squat article and it is emotionally, it's hard to accept that it's the truth. But the funny thing is when I talk to you about it for the first time, you're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Chuck Vogelpohl, talked to Chuck about it the first time, one of the best squatters of all time. Chuck goes, yeah, that makes total sense, right? I've talked to Louis about it. He's like, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. Like, anybody who comes from that lineage accepts and just has wholeheartedly accepted that principle of always getting better at what we're doing. And I think, like, for me, that's what I've taken into the Spot Athletics, is continually improving. So look, our young athletes, like, it's about creating better athletes. So I use metrics that are creating better athletes. What did Louis do? He wanted to create the best powerlifters on the planet. So what did he do? He made better systems to create the best powerlifters on the planet. At the Spot Athletics, we're just, with our athletes and our young athletes, our biggest thing like this, and this comes from power, so at Westside Barbell, you know what I learned? I learned a shit ton of respect for the barbell. Like if you train at Westside Barbell, you respect that barbell and those weights have the biggest opportunity to do good in a person. And like we've experienced, there's an opposite side to that. They have the biggest opportunity to do harm in a person. And so that's one of the things I've taken in the Spot for all of our clients, not just for youth athletes. At our facility, you have to earn the right to touch a barbell. So we have standards that you have to meet, weight, technical standards. You don't get to touch a barbell. Even after you get to touch a barbell, you have more standards to meet to put a barbell on your back. Why? Because it's not a right that's giving. It is a privilege that is earned to put that bar on your back. And that's the way we treat all of our clients, whether it's a young athlete or it's an adult. But ultimately, when our athletes come in, it's about improving the system. Like for me, the sport squat, like obviously people can go and read the article that I wrote last year about how we're all messing up the squat and not looking at it properly. But
link that in this thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. I'm not sure how links work. But
you click on them.
Oh, I love it. Well, I don't know how to insert them. I'm good once it's inserted.
Oh my God.
I'm talking about links, Dave. So I think that, for me, like our philosophy is changed so much, and my time at Westside just it made me that always constantly evolving and improving. To me, if I get to a point where I go 1 month at the Spot Athletics and I don't make my program better there, and I'll push this one further. I just hired a full-time coach, and I told him straight up, I said, if you have a problem with getting better every day, this is not the place for you to work, because I will push you to go there, and you will hate me if you don't like it, or you'll love me for helping you get there. And so the thing is like for me, as a staff, like it's not JL's program, it's the Spot Athletics program. And the thing I make everybody do is, what can we do to make the program better? And if we go a month without making that program better, like I've fucking lost. Like that's the thing I pulled out of Westside. There wasn't a week that went by that Louis didn't make something better in that gym.
Let's jump off here and go into RPR a little bit, because I was the first or second person, the first person to experience the JL RPR experience. So, I don't want to make this a big promotional type of thing. So we'll just lay the story out and lay, the foundation, the history, and kind of where it's gone from there. But JL sent me a text or called me and he said, look, I think I have something that can really help you. And this was around the same time when I had that long-term training plan going on. So I just said, okay, fine. What time do you want me to be there? And I have no idea what the fuck. He's show me a book. I don't know what he's going to do. And I get there and he puts me on a table and puts me through. And it was longer than an hour, but it was the worst pain I've ever had in my entire life, without a doubt. Keep in mind, this guy's got like fucking mighty mitts. Like you won some fucking award for your strongest grip bullshit at the Arnold.
What's that?
No, I mean, he like competed in grip shit and was like winning, and these fucking thumbs and shit were just, but anyhow, I remember laying there and I'm like, this fucking hurts. And then I find out later that whole rib cage is like how they bring people back from the dead, like if they're on the road, paramedics. And I remember, you explaining this stuff to me, and it made total sense the way that you explained it. I'm like, I get this. I'm in for it. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And then I remember sweating, breathing hard, and watching the clock, because I'm like, okay, this is like some massage shit. None of these things last over an hour. So I'm like watching the time, and it was like the longest 10 minutes of my life waiting for that fucker to hit an hour, and then you kept going. And then it went like an hour and 15, an hour and 20. Then I realized I'm fucked. I got no other way into this. I don't have any Vicodin. I got nothing. And So anyhow, that was the experience, and I went into the gym. Make a long story short, we wrote an article about it. Search it up. Went into the gym that day and ended up hitting a 70 pound PR. Not all that I think was really due to the wake up and stuff like that. I think a big part of that, at least 40-50% of it, was just breathing better, learning how to actually breathe, through my nose and then through my mouth, which was a big part of that. But having the ability to open my stomach and diaphragm to even put the air in is where that kind of came in. You can probably explain it a little bit better. But since then, I've seen this go into, me coming in for a session every week saying, okay, man, give me a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to base my training this week on what you say. And then I'm like, okay, fuck, say 6 because I want to go heavy. And I was like, you're like a 4. Fuck, I ain't training this week. And then so we kind of auto-regulated the training. But get past that, now you're doing clinics, level 1 training courses, level 2 training courses. It's branched off now into athletes, or not athletes, but the executives, boardroom, leadership, to where people are doing it themselves. I mean, the same things I still have, the drills that you wrote out on a piece of paper for me that's still in my training bag, that I pull out, even though Tyrell's got a chart there in the back that I still use. So tell me a little bit about the history from after, I did what I did. Because after I was done doing what I was doing, I'm like, fuck that, I ain't doing that shit again. But then I had surgery and, other things kind of happened from that point on. And now Tyrell kind of keeps things in place and shit with that. But talk a little bit about what's been going on with that and what's happened with it, like how it grew and how it's blowing up.
Yeah. So so when I went and learned, Douglas Heel, he teaches it's Be Activated, and it's a practitioner based system, right? And so, it is, right? I called you, I said, come in, I'm going to do this stuff to you. Well, I did that with you, and obviously, if I remember correctly, it was a 90 pound PR. I think you went from 610 to 700 on that bar. And, I'll never forget the call when you called me and how excited you were. And, the thing was, I was like, obviously after you said a 90 pound PR, this shit is, I thought it was amazing, but once you did that, I was 100, I'm like, okay, this is unreal. And so what I realized very quickly was, you came in that day, you were the first person I worked on, and I drew you on a piece of paper, like, here's the things that you need to do yourself. And obviously with RPR, I mean, what it is it's a system of breathing and neurological wake-up drills that you do yourself, right? And so at that point, we weren't even calling them wake-up drills. You and I came up with that because we were talking about it, and we came up with that because when I did it, it was like, okay, it comes, everything happens right away. When you do it, it's like kind of like, it eventually wakes up and everything happens. And so the evolution was, I'm like, holy crap. So, basically it was, okay, well, if I'm doing this as a practitioner to people, I can't do this to our 400 clients at the spot, but they all can use this because it's awesome. So, I drew you those pictures, and it's funny because I don't know, about 6 months ago, you sent me that picture of he sent me a picture of the drawings. He said before it was RPR, and and so he still does have the drawings, which are awesome. And the thing was that what we realized really quickly was that the power of having people, empowering them to do it themselves, just that simple act of me drawing you those pictures and being like, do this, we really realized quickly that that's where the power was, and the power, and what's amazing about RPR is that, I got together, Cal Dietz had introduced me to it, and Douglas and Chris Corfus introduced Cal to them. So I got together with Cal and Chris, and basically what we talked about was, okay, how do we simplify this and make this so that we can just teach people how to do this stuff themselves, as opposed to, like you said, coming to me and we spend, an hour or 2 hours doing stuff, because how often are we going to be able to do that? Not very often. So what we did was, and the crazy part about it was we just really worked on simplifying the system. And so the cool part about RPR and what really separates it and makes it amazing is that it's all about the system. So it's reversing that practitioner-based model of go to this person and they'll fix you. No, we're just going to teach you how to do this stuff yourself, and you can take care of yourself. And so it's amazing because the cumulative effect of being able to do the breathing and the wake-up drills, multiple times a day, you can put yourself in this amazing place by yourself, and you don't need a practitioner, which is an awesome thing, right? Self-reliance is really cool. The other thing was that, when we go to implement this at the spot, right? I don't want, like Tyrell is a chiropractor and Debbie's physical therapist. If someone really has an issue and they need to go to them, they can do RPR with them. That's what they do. But my young strength coaches, right? Like they shouldn't be doing that type of work with other people. So in simplifying it and making the system what it is, the whole purpose was so that strength coaches can implement it with 100 football players. Every football player can do it for themselves and make themselves in a better place, right? Our girls volleyball team, our girls lacrosse teams, we can implement RPR with the teams. And so what's been amazing is that, when we first started transitioning this and teaching it, we still were teaching, you come to a clinic and I would work on you, you would work on me. Now what's been awesome is we realized that's not the intended purpose for RPR. So actually now, one of the slides in our clinics is we say, if you're touching someone, you're not doing RPR. The whole purpose of RPR has really evolved, and we've spent, I don't even know, countless hours really refining it. So it's a system that anybody can learn, anybody can use, and they get to use it themselves to make themselves better. And that's really, to me, the cool part, because, with my lower back injury, man, I went and saw, how many people do you go see? Like 1 million, And every person I go see, and I saw some great people who helped me quite a bit. But when I would ask them and be like, well, how did you do this? Or what did you do this? Like, well, I've been doing this for 30 years and it's taken thousands of hours. The amazing part about RPR is literally in one day, we give someone the system to impact people at a level that's life-changing. Every time we do a clinic, I get texts from people afterwards. It's like, oh my God, this person did this and it was amazing. This person's never done this and it's amazing. And so the cool part to me is that it's not about JL, it's not about Cal, it's not about anybody, it's not about anybody. It's about the system and allowing people to empower themselves to create the change. And that's what's been so awesome about the evolution was when you came in, I was, and Douglas still teaches Be Activated on that practitioner level. And that is needed, right? Like you need to go see someone if you get to a certain point. But for 90% of the people, they can basically make themselves get to a place where they feel great every day. And so the evolution's been so cool because it's gone from, me putting you on a table and basically crushing you for 2 hours and my thumbs being sore for 3 days to a place now where we actually, when I show people RPR, I never do anything to them. I just show them, I'll test flexibility and strength. And then I basically just show them what to do. And then boom, that's it. And we've had, tons, we've done tons with NFL teams and major college teams. And I was actually in London, England, not London, Ohio, back in January teaching RPR. And we've done some stuff with special forces units. And the cool part is, to me, is that I've never been a fan of how just our medical model works or how that practitioner-based model works. And, honestly, the most interesting thing is that we tell people, practitioners, physical therapists and massage therapists and things like that, we actually actively tell them, this isn't for you. This is for strength coaches. This is for personal trainers. Our goal is to educate strength coaches and personal trainers to be able to impact and show people so they can show their clients how to get their nervous system in a place that helps them perform better. So the cool part is no matter what your training system is, whether we talked about HIIT, conjugate, all those things, RPR doesn't change the way you do any of your training. It just makes your training more efficient and more effective. And so that, to me, that's the power. The funny part is that we've had some practitioners go through and they don't like our system. And it's interesting. The reason they don't like it is because it's about the system. So they come through and they've spent all these hundreds of thousands of dollars on education. And we're teaching something that nobody else is teaching, and that's a system. And so they have to spend years and years and years to develop a skill set, and someone comes in for one day. And see, this is the thing, is we get addicted to helping people, right? Like, you came into me, it's like I'm the person that fixed Dave, or I'm the person that helped Dave set the PR. What I love about where we've gotten with our PR and where we're going and moving with it is that people come in now, I'm not doing anything for them. What I'm doing is showing them how they can do it themselves. So we're just enabling them to get their own body in a place that God meant it to be in the first place. And that's operating at a really high level. And so that's where the evolution's been really awesome, is that it's taken away all of the Dave came to JL and this is what JL did. And it's moved it to RPR is this system. You can use it to make the change in your own body. And that's what I love. And honestly, that's what a lot of the practitioners don't like, because if it's about the system, not about the person, that steals the power of being the person who fixes, because it's the system that does the work, not the person. And that's scary for a lot of people who've relied and have been addicted to being that person. And so for me, I was just lucky. I was never that. I was just a strength coach who wanted to win games, right? And set world records and do these things. So for me, moving it to that was better, because quite frankly, I don't want to see you every week. I don't want to do that with you. Now, I want to help you in your training, right? So it's like, go do all these wake up drills, do the breathing, do all that, and then let me watch you squat. You know, so for me, it wasn't hard to move that over to that, because that's who I am. That's what I've always wanted to do, right? It's just, let's put as much good into the world. So it's been, I mean, I can't even tell you how many hours like refining this and getting it down, but you know, it's been awesome. I know you've obviously seen the progression and just the building, right? Like, you know, it's whether it's, you know, every power lifter I've shown now has set huge PRs that day, right? I mean, it's one of those things that, like, until you feel it, there's no way you can comprehend the kind of change that you feel in your body. And, you know, it's been, I mean, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, ultimately kind of where I'm at with it is anybody who breathes and moves, RPR is going to help make things better for them. And the reason is that in our modern medical unit, essentially, the way the body's been studied and understood is incomplete. I look at it like a light fixture, right? Your nervous system is just the electricity. And your muscles are the light bulbs. That's what we see working, right? That's what we see doing it. The fixture, that's the fascia, the tendons, the bones. We get all that. Well, since the Enlightenment in modern medicine, because we don't have a sophisticated enough equipment to be able to study exactly what's happening in the body and the nervous system while it's working, then we basically pretend it doesn't exist. And so we go right to the fixture and start trying to, like, you know, manipulate and do this, or we go to the muscles and we want to do this. With RPR, we teach people a simple system where they can actually flip the switches in their body and get their body in a better place right away. And so it's something that it's impossible to get people, like, it's easy to understand. I just explained it.
Yeah.
But until people feel instant change in flexibility, instant change in strength, instant PRs, you can't comprehend it, right? And so it's funny because people, you know, they'll see a video of it and they'll be skeptical or think, oh, this is voodoo or this is this. But honestly, like, that's how I was when I first started. And then the first time I felt it, just like you set a 90 PM PR first time. Well, like, the reality sets in pretty quick. This is a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, voodoo or not, still 90 pounds.
Yeah, right.
Fucking 90 pounds. You know?
Not 90 pounds, 90 pounds.
So if people wanted to learn more about it, where do they go?
So we are actually in the process of getting ready to launch our online. So we realized that one of the limiting factors was we're teaching all in person. And so just, you know, we've taught over 100 in-person clinics now, and we've really refined that and got to a great place. So we're actually ready to launch our online so that people don't have to come see us in person. They can do it at home on their own pace. So if people go to RPR Level 1 Online, that's all just written out, just rprlevel1online.com, then they can actually pre-order the online course. It comes out May 1st, and anybody who pre-orders gets like a really cool t-shirt we're designing just for the pre-launch. So super excited about that, because I know I've had people, like I was just at OSU Strength Conditioning Clinic a couple weeks ago, and like 10 people came up and like, oh my God, when are you having another course? Every time you have one, I've got this or I've got this. So I really think the online is a huge component for us, just because it's tough to just travel somewhere. You know what I mean? Like it's tough to commit to that time and the travel and all that. Plus, you know, we're all busy. We got stuff going on. So I'm super pumped about the online getting released.
Now, when they order the online course, how long will that stay open for?
So they have the content forever. I mean, that's one of the things, you know, just going to my philosophy and again, like what I learned from you, right? Like what Elite FTS does better than anybody and has done, I think, longer than anybody, is just provide amazing information. And it provides it all for free. And so, you know, one of the things for me is like, okay, like, yeah, there's how do we do this? But for me, it was like, look, if people want to learn this and they take it back to their gym, or they're a strength conditioning coach, they can take it to their college. Like, I want them to have that resource forever, so that they always can refer back to it and go, man, what was this? Oh, I need to get this. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about this. So they're continually evolving. And cause you know how it is. You go through something one time, 2 times, 3 times, it takes a while to like really, every time you do it, you pick up new things. And so for us, we're leaving that open. Once you buy it, you have that content forever, so that you can keep impacting and making amazing changes in people's lives.
Cool.
Awesome, man. One thing I want to talk about real quick.
Yeah.
Summit coming up April 26th, 27th.
Yeah.
So I'm just really excited about that.
Cool.
So lots of amazing speakers that are going to be in town. We're doing it at the compound here.
Yep.
So I'm really pumped about that. I just wanted to talk about that, because I think that I'm really
we
excited
have
about
Maybe explain how it's different than past events.
well, it's going to be here. I mean, it's from the strength coaching summit that we've had before. We used to have, I think they were a couple different locations.
Sport Performance Summit.
Sport Performance Summit. It was at OSU. This is the first one that we're going to move into the gym. We've had past seminars that were in the gym, but not the Sport Performance Summit. The other thing that we did with this one is we had a Success Summit, which was separate than the Sport Performance Summit. Well, this time we combined them both, because what we found it was the same demographic. So people who are in the sport performance industry today, the industry is not what it was 20 years ago. The industry today, coaches do need to learn how to market themselves, how to brand themselves. I don't want to say they need to become social media superstars, but they need to know how to use social media to build their brand, so they don't look like an asshat, so they look like somebody that would want to be hired, a professional, but not over the top professional either. So we have people that have done great jobs at doing that, as well as being icons, in the profession. I mean, Buddy Morris is what I believe the second strength coach ever hired, who's still out there. Now, his social media is not going to be the greatest
in the history of time, actually.
History of time. And his social media probably sucks, but you know what? He doesn't need it, because he's been around for so long, and that's not why we're bringing him in. And we don't have, like I said, the social media superstars, but we have enough people around that are going to be able to tell you, this is how you can vet out what's real. This is how you can vet out what's bullshit. And then the people that we're bringing in, we've already vetted out what's real and what's bullshit, because we live in that space. So we got Buddy Morris, we have yourself, there's Julia Ladusky. I know I'm going to forget somebody. There's Joe Bennett. There's, help me out here. Huh? Ken Kanakin, which is great. Eric Serrano, which is great. I forgot one.
I think, one of the things, though, is that what I love is that we're doing, so this is different. I mean, obviously I've, been a part of a lot of events and going way back, but what I love best about this one is that we're doing the talks on one day. The next day we're doing workshops.
Yes.
And so to me, this is one of those events that, like, from a perspective of just having, access to people and being able to learn, You know, it's one thing to sit in the audience and listen to someone speak. That's great, and there's a huge value in that. But to me, being in here in this small environment and then having the chance to break off and do the workshops with everybody, like honestly, like part of me, I'm like, man, like I'm happy to be speaking. I'm super honored and grateful to be speaking. But part of me is like, I just would like to do workshops with some of the other people because there's stuff I want to learn from those other people. And I don't get that kind of access to them because they're having this dedicated time. And so I'm super pumped about it. I know like definitely my staff's really pumped about it. And I told them, I was like, don't listen to me talk. Like you hear me talk all the time. Go listen to these other people.
Yeah. And with the workshops, we're first off, we don't do these seminars to make profit. You know, we actually break even if we're lucky on any of these things. So that's how we set our attendance is what is the amount that we need to break even and then stop. Because you get too many people, then you lose that personal interaction. So a lot of the workshops, each person will be able to attend, I think, 2 workshops. Some workshops will be in the conference room, which is only going to hold 15 people. So you're going to have, access to, say it's Eric Serrano, and 15 people for 3 hours. Right. You're going to be able to pick this guy's mind. I don't care if you're afraid to ask questions or not. If you're 1 out of 15 people in a room with him for 3 hours, you're going to walk away with thousands of dollars worth of content, not to mention everybody else having their workshops at the same time. The only sad part about the whole thing is not everybody's going to be able to attend every workshop just because of time. But that is what it is, and we'll figure out a way to work those bugs out later down the line. But that part I really do like about what we're doing here because it's also new. So it's something else we get to tinker with to see how it's going to work. And then I think the VIP are already sold out, but there's the open training.
Alwyn Cosgrove is that.
Cosgrove. I can't forget Alwyn. God damn it. He's going to be so pissed at me because I forgot him.
You should have forgot him.
Oh, my God. But, I mean, when you want to talk about, a person who knows their shit about training and a person that knows their shit about the business of training, you're talking about somebody who I do believe was cited as having the highest profit per square foot of any training facility in America. So that in itself, plus he's funny as fuck. So it's just going to be a good time.
Yeah.
And we still got spots left. I think we got 3 spots left.
There's always 3 spots
There's always 3 spots left. We do have spots left. The VIPs are sold out. I think there might be, if I was to guess, I haven't looked today, maybe 25, 30 that are left. So
yeah, I know I'm doing my workshop on RPR, which is going to be a lot of fun because I'll be able to blow people's minds with a lot of fun stuff.
So it'll be very cool. So I'm looking really forward to everybody attending.
Awesome, man. This was awesome. This was a lot of fun.
Cool. Thank you for being a part.
Hey, thanks for watching.
Second awkward podcast.
Why? If I'm here, it's not awkward.
Actually, I don't like talking to a mic.
You need to stop banging on your mic.
I know.
I can hear that every time.